All at once, the world changed. The demon was flooded with power, more than it had ever felt before, and the world around it slowed down. Seconds turned into minutes for it as it felt the thrill of success screaming out to it. It had done it. It had pushed beyond its limits, reaching greater heights just like its god had hoped, and it could feel the power it now held acting as the reward. Not just in the strength it had gained though, but the skill as well. The voice in its head that sang of its newfound strength told it as much, and it could feel the change itself as the link it had up with all of its limbs strengthened significantly. More than that though, it could feel the limits of its magic practically disappear. Until then, it would only see 5 minutes down any path, but now it felt like there was no limit, at least for the time. It was sure it would find one after it tested its new power for a bit, but that was going to need to wait. In the moment it had only one goal: dominating the creature that had caused it so much trouble. A part of it wanted to kill it then and there, but the demon held itself back. No matter what rage filled it, the fact the creature had been able to push it so far was a testament to how useful it would be, and now, feeling victory on its fingertips, it stretched out with its magic, looking for the future where it won. And it found nothing. It was so much more powerful than it had been only moments before, and could create more paths for itself to walk down with all of that strength too, but it couldn't see a single one where it came out on top, forcing a scream from its throat at the unjustness of it all. It had pushed so far past its limits. Why could it still not win? It was a question it wasn't going to get an answer to. Its time limit was up. Feeling something creeping into its head, no matter how it tried to fight it off, eventually the world went black around it, spelling out its defeat. As Ben slumped down to the ground in exhaustion, every other person and demon around him did the same. All right, that was a little too freaking close for comfort. When he'd first connected with the demon, he'd thought he was going to have a heart attack when he saw it was a contender for 2 skills, and then had nearly been sick when he heard it awaken them. He'd known it had to have had an unreasonably high level in its skills, but he hadn't been remotely prepared for what he'd found, and all he could do was thank his lucky stars his mind was still more powerful in the end. The demon had lost the second he'd gotten within its range, but it had insisted on making it feel close the entire time. Myriad asked, breaking him from his thoughts. Did the demon reach the 3rd tier, you mean? Yeah, that happened, and I have bad news on top of it. Well, sorry, but you've gotta. But just for emphasis, I want to say this is only kind of my fault. I'm reading this thing's memories as we speak. Because of how definitively the first wave ended, it looks like Owen sent down a few of his more promising prospects. It can't be a ton, but I'm pretty sure there's other contenders that made it to this world. His god said in defeat, trusting the news no matter how bad it was. On the one hand, that was going to be their first recorded time having the demons well and truly break whatever self-imposed rules they had for themselves, but on the other, if it was a reaction to what happened after the first wave, then it made sense. No matter how it happened or what was done to cause it, their victory on that front had been decisive enough to demand a change from their enemies. Like what? Ben pinched his brow when he heard that. We literally passed a group of ghosts heading somewhere earlier. They weren't going in our direction, so Thera dealt with them, but I could feel them being led. Damn it, I guess someone needs to spread the word that if anyone finds any ghosts in the future, then they need to be followed. Ben didn't need to ask what Myriad was talking about. It was obvious nobody wanted the birth of a demon god on the world. The planet just so happened to be lucky enough that it happened around the person most equipped to prevent it. I'll deal with it in a minute. For now, there's something I need to do first. He'd taken over the demon completely, but had gained an unexpected side benefit in the mix, as not only had he dominated that one but every other creature under it too. He already had the more distant demons moving, and with a small bit of will, he had the rest kill each other as quickly as he could. Each bite of tooth and claw felt like they were tearing into his own flesh, but he was able to get past it as all of the demons in the area slowly died until there was only a single one left. With the rest gone, that left only the ringleader before him, and he felt himself begin to salivate with what that meant as he pulled out one of his knives and altered the shape and enchantments on it before enchanting on a rainbow mana crystal to place within. He had to trap the soul to ensure it never rose to godhood. That would be a nightmare for both gods and mortals alike. But that wasn't where his thoughts lied in the moment. That thing was going to become a god. In some senses it already was. And he let himself hope that it would be enough for the notification he so desperately wanted to finally ring out as he slid his blade into the creature's heart. Good enough, I guess. He'd prayed so desperately that killing that demon might finally have awakened his sacrilege, but it seemed that still wasn't meant to be, with his failure on that front taking a bit of the wind from his otherwise incredible achievement of completing his seemingly impossible job. Still, with everyone around him freed from the demon's hold and Thera, Phone, and Pato all needing to be released from their confines, Ben couldn't put off picking his next job, and he touched his crystal to do exactly that. Available jobs. Trap User. Craftsman Alchemy Path. Craftsman Artistic Path. Craftsman Blacksmith Path. Craftsman Cooking Path. Craftsman Stonecrafts Path. Craftsman Sewing Path. A Mathematician. A High Tank. Divine Enchanter. A High Marksman. A High Destruction Mage. Beginner Puppeteer. Connect Master. Holy Adversary. Title Master. A Multiversal Material Mage. Outsider. Body User. Slayer. A Judge. Assassin. Cycler. A Beginner Dancer.
Entrée.
Hive Brain. A King of Intelligence. A Master of Destiny. Soul Creator. Beneficiary. A God-defiling Gardener. Expert. Master Actualizer. Support the author by searching for the original publication of this novel. So many options to choose from still after his mass job run, but there was only one he was going to take. It didn't matter that he'd just gotten a level to it, he wanted all of the bonuses he could get. I'll take Connect Master. Name, Ben Hef. Race Human. Titles: Apostle of Myriad, The Forgotten One, Miracle Maker, Skill Learner, Enemy of Aneth, Trial Defier, Trial Breaker, Godslayer, Monster, Madman, God Killer, Threat, the Mad Apostle, Destined Holder of Connect, God of Destruction, Creator of Life, Awakener, Maniac, Brutal Blacksmith, Defier of Gods, Title Holder, Enemy of Valencia, Great Teacher, Student of Helori, Myriad's Monster, Outsider Slayer, Demigod Slayer, Transgressor, Destined Holder of Mental Symbiosis, Destined Holder of Alien Thought Structure, Destined Holder of Soul Production, Job Holder, Destined Holder of Actualization. Jobs: Connect Master, LV10. Previous jobs: Apprentice Craftsman, Craftsman, Priest, Enchanter, Mind User, Magic Item Maker, Magic Weapon Maker, High Enchanter, Fractured Mind User, Tree Tamer, High Craftsman, Apprentice Mage, True Mage, Tank, Heretic, Adventurer, Divine Heretic, Kin, Master Craftsman, Master Enchanter, Scholar, Connected Enchanter, Infernal Craftsman, Marksman, Destruction Mage, Material Mage, High Material Mage, Profane Enchanter, Master Material Mage, Impious Creator, Mind Master, Master Adventurer, Otherworldly Craftsman, Material Creator, Master of All, Ritual Enchanter, Holy Craftsman, Cursed Item Maker, Actualizer, Summoned Enchanter, Destructive Craftsman, Soul Mage, Freak Mind User, Unholy Thinker, Polymath, Alien Mind, Soul User, Soul Master, Evil Soul User, Soul Defiling Gardener, High Actualizer World Killer. Attributes: A Vitality, 2814. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 67 per hour. Mana, 5265. Mana Recovery Rate, 436 per minute. Strength, 2283. Agility, 618. Stamina, 4970. Intelligence, 19440. Affinities: Light 3, Life 2, a Fire 4, Water 3, Air 4, Earth 2, Death 3, Dark 1, Space 4, Time 5. Resistances: Light 68, Life 72, Fire 75, Water 69, Air 66, Earth 81, Death 78, Dark 85, Space 63, Time 61. Blessed Skills: Unending Crafting LV8*, Divine Enchanting LV8*, Unnatural Mind LV9*. Passive Skills: King of Sacrilege LV9 *. A bind. Integrated Demonic Body LV9. Defense Enhancement LV9. Absorption Resistance LV9. Knowledge LV9 *. All Affinity Resistance Enhancement LV9. Unnatural Inspiration LV4 *. Abite Enhancement LV6. Piercing Resistance LV8. Artisan's Touch. Unnatural Intelligence Enhancement LV2 *. Reconstructed Alien Thought Structure *. Blood Regeneration LV3. Extraction Enhancement LV9. Soul Affinity LV0 *. Modifier Compatibility.
Material sense latonia no.
Flavor Enhancement LV1. Ill Intent LV2 *. Balance Enhancement LV3. Soul Expansion LV5. Defiler of Ambrosia. Destruction Affinity LV3 *. Evil Affinity LV3 *. Active Skills. Stealth LV2. Deep Connection LV8 *. Cycling LV2. Marksmanship LV9. Material Manipulation LV8 *. Swimming LV2. Dance LV1. Unnatural Thought Speed LV9 *. Hive Mind LV5 *. Rule Bender LV1. Aim LV8. Esoteric Actualization LV3 *. Soul Source LV3 *. Lucid Dreaming. Blessings. Myriad's Blessing. Analia's Blessing. Hilori's Blessing. Galwax's Blessing. Elvet's Mana Regeneration Blessing. Enetha's Blessing. Earth Pantheon's Blessing. Life Pantheon's Blessing. Dark Pantheon's Blessing. Olencia's Blessing. Nair's Blessing. Yuzu's Mana Regeneration Blessing. Witness of Chaos. On's Blessing. Trials. Trial of Analia and Talona. Trial of the Dead God. Earth Tower. Life Tower. Dark Tower. Yeah, I guess I'm good with that. He hadn't been expecting any new levels, so getting his soul inclination to awaken was an unexpected bonus that had rewarded him a few job levels on top of it. It was a bit of a shame he didn't get more. He should have technically still been a part of the party until he was either kicked out or the person who held the job completed theirs, but he had no doubt that the second he'd finished World Killer and had stopped being such a massive resource sink, all of the experience his basic mental structure was creating thanks to having Verbum in the party had let the rest of them get as many levels as possible until their adventurer had run out. But oh well, it's not like it's going to take me long to finish this anyway. Even though it was a master job, he had his skill at the 8th level of the 2nd tier. Even if he didn't have a strategy for it, it wouldn't have taken him long to complete, but since he had his master plan for completing it and all other jobs, he didn't particularly care. Multiple lifetime worth of experience were about to be claimed in only a couple days, and he couldn't wait to get them. But first, there were other priorities. While everyone else around him was only just beginning to make sense of what had happened, he stood up and called out, "All right, everyone, your minds ended up a little suppressed, so your memories might be a bit foggy, but for now I'll make it clear you're all safe and there's nothing to worry about. Ignore all of the demon corpses around you and stay still for just a bit." As an afterthought, he released the 3 he'd been keeping safe from the Voidstone, holding them, and let them deal with their own bits of disorientation as they fell to the ground, paying them no mind as he walked away. After all, they weren't trapped under an evil demon's mind control, instead getting to enjoy my super ethical, super gentle mind control, which is absolutely completely different beyond the fact that mine has worse range. Without another thought, he grabbed the first piece of Voidstone from the ground, breaking the enchantments on it to let Thera pop out as he caught her in the air, getting to see the disoriented look on her face as a reward. "What just happened?" she asked groggily, seeming more like she'd come out of a nap than a demon's control as Ben answered. "Long story short, a demon contender took you and almost everyone else over, and it was a pain in the ass to deal with. I'll fill you in on the rest later, but first we have to free Pato, and he's going to need some healing because I definitely broke a few of his bones, and then after we're going to need to find where Phone got sealed away. Oh, but there's nothing to worry about. After one of the most annoying fights of my life, I won, so everyone's safe." He gave her a wide grin as she processed everything he had to say until eventually she just reached up a hand to begin healing him before doing everything else they were going to have to if they wanted to be on their way. After Pato was released and Phone was found, Ben focused on giving a fuller explanation of events, while Thera worked on healing them all. No one was without injury, and even if the chimeras would surely heal on their own, it was better to get it done and over with then as the rest of their quest went on. A quest that finished easily enough compared to the disaster in the middle, with no great issues presented in the last two demon swarms no matter how on edge they all were as a result. With the invaders' numbers cleared out before that second day was through, letting everything come to an end for them to make it back to the gate. There was no air of victory or success though. Both the adventurers and chimeras had been left humbled by how things had turned out, which was felt in Phone's final words. Well, no matter what happened, just remember why we were sent out there. The Oni told them, trying and failing to put on a positive tone. We're here to give a report, and that's exactly what we'll do. As our employer said at the very beginning, you can hand it off to any guild on the Gate Network once you finish writing it up, but otherwise you're all free to leave. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. With no long goodbye, people began to part, though nearly all of them stopped to give Ben their thanks or a nod along the way for what he'd done until it was only himself, Thera, and Phone left. Ah, bit of a shame. I wouldn't have minded talking to Pato a bit more, Ben said. Wonder if I'll get another chance? I wouldn't be surprised, Phone told him. Rank 1 quests may not be common, but there also aren't many of us. It wouldn't be a shock if we're called to help with something a bit more bloody before the final wave rolls in. Final, huh? That one word was enough to tell Ben where their temporary leader sat when it came to expectations on how it might go, but he didn't comment beyond that, only giving a smile. Well, if we get the chance, it would be good working with you too, Phone. If we end up on another quest together, I'll make sure to treat you to a decent meal again. Should the opportunity come, I'll look forward to it. He smiled back before offering both of them his hand. It was a pleasure working with the two of you, and Ben, I don't take having my life saved lightly. If you ever need anything, feel free to send in a message through the guild. All right, I appreciate it. Good. Now, I must be on my way, but be well. With one last nod, he went off, leaving only the two alone, and let Thera drop some of her professionalism to slump on his shoulder. Well, that was a nightmare. Yeah, it was. Managed to get your fill of excitement from a rank 1 quest though. The author's content has been appropriated. Report any instances of this story on Amazon. Well, the parts where interesting things were happening I was a puppet, and the boring parts one was an observer, so that is going to be a big no. Plus, I now need to write a proper report, which is not going to be fun. Oof, yeah, that would suck. He agreed as he materialized a thick-bound book in his hand. The report he'd been constructing in his head since the quest began instantly completed while Thera tried to reach for it. Come on, just a peek. Nope. Sorry, but you need to get your thoughts and opinions down before you're polluted with mine. MMH. Is there any chance I could get you to just read my mind and then materialize whatever thoughts and opinions I'd formed during all of this? I mean, if you really want me to, I can. No. I'll write this stupid thing for my stupid aunt. She sighed at the end before glancing back his way. So how was fighting me? The most horrifying thing I've ever had to do. If it wasn't for the fact that the demon seemed to really want to get its hands on my brain, then I think I would have died, and even then I feel like I came uncomfortably close. I'm also a little uncomfortable with how that answer seems to be perking you up. I have no clue what you're talking about. Exhaustion and strain must have made you delirious. I don't think I can get delirious at this point. Looking to beat me up so badly? Ha! I think it's just nice to know I might still be stronger than you. I feel like the words "might be" are a pretty severe understatement here. Please don't pull me into the center of the planet or rip me apart cell by cell if you start feeling unconfident. MMH, you don't have to worry about that, but a proper spar between us could be fun one day. Can I politely pass? For now. Okay. I'll leave my worries for the future then. So what now? Head back to Stonewall for the night? I'm looking at an early morning. Or you take a break for a day after we just went through all of that. I'm for sure taking one. Ah, maybe in a couple after, he told her happily, finally sharing his good news now that they were alone. All of that worked out a fair bit better for me than I let on. Not only did I finish a whole bunch of levels, I completed my job. I'm already basically shaking to see how many people accepted my request. Gods above, maybe I really won't be stronger than you much longer if you're really going to finish so many jobs. Well, seeing as how I'd actually need to train under all of those bonuses, first, I'm still not beating you out anytime soon, and besides, it's not like I'm not going to help you finish all of your jobs too. MH no, she told him, shaking her head. Focus on helping our friends. What? It's not like I'm going to have many good options left, she shrugged. And most of what I still have won't even give me major bonuses. It's better to spend the time helping others that could actually take advantage of it than waste the opportunity on me when a decent demon hunt would get me a bunch of levels for most of what I have. Even if he didn't completely agree, he could at least see the logic in it, so he didn't put up too much of a fuss, even if he added one request. Okay. But depending on how things work out, I'm hoping you might join me with Master of All whenever you take it. That would free up a couple of the positions in the party, and would mean I could take an extra person I actually care about on top of the added satisfaction of knowing I'd helped you out. Alright, fine. But seeing as how you're not going to do that tonight, come on. After all that, I just want to sleep. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Even after being healed, Ben was still strained in ways that only proper rest would help, and with plans for the future dancing in his head, the two went home for the bit of peace they would get. After all that they'd been through, Thera just wanted to rest when they got back to Stonewall, but for Ben, that was a far greater challenge. He was practically vibrating in excitement, already imagining what the future held for him now that he'd finished his ridiculous job and was free to take the rest of what he had. That even the idea of spending a few hours with the gods was too much, and eventually, once he heard the sound of Thera's soft breathing beside him, he decided to give up on the prospect and instead start his day. Really, he wanted to race off to the guild then and there, but he forced himself to hold back on that front, at least briefly. It wasn't like the parties he'd called for would be there after all. They were still a few days away from the big event, but it would at least tell him how many to expect, and then he could gather others to help his friends take advantage of what he was about to do as well. And I asked for 70, but even if I don't get all of them, I've got to be snagging 20 at the very least, right? And then even if that slows me down by a day or two, once word spreads about what I've done, I'll be able to gather the rest a lot easier, and then, focus, I'm not going off to do this yet. Just get one teeny tiny chore done first. That chore led him to the shop and through the newest of the mini-gates it held, bringing him to a building out in the untamed lands where the great space spirit still sat waiting as Ben arrived, a bright grin on his face. Well, hey there. Oh, Guilt? No problems while I was away? None. They're still all contained with no obvious issues. Love hearing it. In that case, just gotta see what the results are like. With that done, he went around the rooms, looking at the cards of all of his test subjects for any further changes and finding none. Not that such a result was unexpected when every demon there was trapped in a closet-sized room while being kept docile by one of Ben's enchanted circlets. There had been no opportunity for them to train and grow, and as far as he was concerned, they'd never get it. With what progress that front would provide being reserved for once he moved on to testing the peoples of the world, while his current test subjects would be receiving nothing but more of the same until it was time to put them down. Before he began the next round of experiments on them, though he took a thorough look at all of their minds to judge how much pain they were each still under, finding that those who'd only had their soul modified once were freed of it, with varying degrees lingering on those who'd gone through a second modification and only the slightest of improvements for those who'd gone through a third, with no signs that the minds that had collapsed under the suffering he'd created had healed at all. All valuable information as he began the process of incorporating new soul structures into the ones who seemed to have returned to a normal condition, letting him gather even more data, with results for attribute growth seeming consistent with earlier tests where he'd immediately added a second soul after his first one. There was no greater or lesser acquisition of attributes for the demons despite letting their souls heal and adjust to the changes, which told him that on that front at least it didn't matter, even if there was a single result that made it worth considering once it became time to start doing it on the people of the world. While it still caused pain in those receiving it, it was only a little worse than what they went through having only a single soul added to their own, not the compounded suffering that resulted from having a second applied immediately after the first. That in itself was a good result, one that told him that if he was going to share the results of his tests with the world, then he'd be able to boost people's attributes at least twice without harming them, assuming that the pain of the second modification faded the same way as the first, and possibly even further beyond. He'd still need to see how his other tests fared, and he'd still need to confirm that modifying people's attributes in such a way wouldn't kill their growth rates, but so far things looked promising enough that he was ready to prepare a round of testing amongst any volunteers he might be able to gather. The narrative has been stolen. If detected on Amazon, report the infringement. But it also means one other thing too. Hey O'Gilt, how long are you willing to stay here to help out? I've already had you for a few days. If you want to quit then that's all good. I'll stay here forever. It makes no difference to me. Alright, well it does to me. Are you not bored? Compared to the last segment of my life, how could I be? I'm not caged, but I get to enjoy being alone. This is all I could want. Okay. I'm only going to ask you to spend another couple weeks out here for me then, but if you change your mind at any point just let me know when I come through. Or if an emergency comes up, if you could ask a few of the other space spirits to look this place over, just to be sure nothing escapes, then that would be great. All right? O'Gilt nodded, feeling no compulsion to leave while Ben sighed as he looked the spirit over. While not as bad as so many of the other prisoners who were still being kept in Analia until Ben could do anything about their crumbled mental health, it was obvious the space spirit was far from anything approaching good shape either, and leaving him alone wasn't going to improve that. He may have been happier by himself, but he wasn't going to get better that way. And yet, Ben needed these tests done, and he needed to have someone watch to ensure nothing went wrong. This was another experiment he could use to strengthen the world, and if it worked out would save lives. It didn't change the fact that it left some guilt festering in him though, and in an effort to relieve it, just a little, he began materializing, catching the Great Spirit's interest. What are you doing? Making you things, Ben told him as he created books, video games, and even film and a projector through his power. There for entertainment. Since you have WorldSpeak bound to you like everyone else, you should be able to read, but for the games, just run a few points of mana through these slabs and you'll have something to play, and just insert different films into the projector for something to watch. He demonstrated what he meant by each to give the spirit some context, even if it just left it looking confused by the end. Why? Because if I don't do this then the guilt is going to eat me up. Just try to avoid sitting around doing nothing but feeling bad while you're here. Okay? I get you want time to yourself, but I still want you to live. The spirit said nothing to that, and with a small shake of his head Ben left, hoping the other would at least try to enjoy the things he'd made. With that bit done, Ben moved from one of his gates to the next, going through the network to eventually end up at the Magic Towers Adventurers Guild, letting himself in while trying to keep a level of positivity despite the worry he felt for O'Gilt. He wasn't going to be able to undo millennia of harm, but he could at least focus back on the positives of his life and the things he was looking forward to, along with one other chore first as he waited in line to talk to one of the employees, pulling out a book from one of his rings as he did while showing his card. Hello there. Ben here to submit the report for a rank 1 quest. I was told giving it to any guild on the network would be acceptable. All right, thank you very much, the employee said with a nod, even if they looked confused as they spoke again. But there really was no need to have it bound. Yep, I can see why that would look weird. Just a hobby, don't mind it. And I also put in a request for a quest myself. It's still a few days away, but I'm mainly here to see how many have been confirmed to have accepted so far. All right, just give me a minute to check, they told him, rifling through some papers as Ben waited, not holding any expectations until their expression took a turn and their voice grew stiff. I'm sorry, sir. It looks like no one has accepted your offer. No one, Ben repeated, already going through their mind to try and see more context. If you'd seen how much I've been offering, you should know pretty damn well that's impossible. It's unfortunate, but sometimes things turn out this way, they tried to say, sounding stiff while Ben managed to see in their memories exactly what had caused it, while he tried to keep himself contained. It seemed the paper they'd read hadn't shown that he hadn't received any takers, but instead had a note telling whatever employee ended up reading it to tell him as much, meaning for whatever reason, the Adventurers Guild had made the intentional choice to not help one of their first ranks. He clenched his fists and took a deep breath before unclenching, already feeling like whatever was happening was going to be a pain to deal with as he spoke again. All right, listen, I know this isn't your fault, but I also know you're lying. So is your guild master, and so I can deal with them, or do I have to track down wherever they live to demand answers on their doorstep? Just one moment. I'll get them for you. "Oh, I think I'll follow along, thanks." He didn't want to give them any time to be warned about who he was or why he was there, and much to the employee's discomfort he walked behind them, through a hallway and up some stairs until ending up in front of another door that the employee tried to knock on, failing entirely as Ben just let himself in. "Hello there," he said in forced cheer. "I've come for answers, and I'm hoping you want to do this the easy way." The man on the other side didn't immediately respond, at first looking more surprised than anything before their attention turned to the employee Ben had come with, waiting for some context while they tried to shrink into themselves. Ahem, first-rank adventurer, Ben Heff, here with concerns about his recently submitted quest. While that didn't get any visible reaction, Ben was already in his mind and could feel the worry such a statement brought while he continued on with his false cheer. "Yep, that's me, and while I'll at least say for your poor employees' benefit that they didn't let on that you lot had decided to suppress my quest for some reason, let's be real, it was obvious. Who would believe I wouldn't get a single taker when I was offering so much? Honestly, get better at lying. So now the only question is why. I'm sorry, but I'm not at liberty to say." Ben could feel the fear in the other man even as he said it. Since Ben was at the first rank, that meant he had at least 2 awakened skills, more than enough to tear the place apart if they were combat-oriented. If he was angry enough, and despite the feelings of good cheer he was trying to project, it was plenty clear he was seething inside. He might have even given in to those feelings too, if not for the fact that he'd gotten the answer he wanted from the other man's mind, telling him all he needed to know. The quest hadn't been denied at his discretion but had come from the very top, with that guild not even getting a reason as to why, giving Ben somewhere else to direct his rage as he asked only one thing more. "Where can I find the head guild location?" Returning to a city Ben had been to twice before, he was once more at Warrior's Tower, walking the streets he'd once rioted through to end up at a grand building that made up the home of the main branch of the Adventurers Guild, and let himself in, finding the place swarmed. It shouldn't have been a surprise, as the biggest branch he'd seen by far in a city that was wholly devoted to developing one's combat skills. There were plenty who would take the job, both to prove themselves and as a form of practice in whatever spare time they had, so it was bound to be busy, but at least it was staffed well. With the line he went in moving smoothly as he got to the front while he tried to keep his feelings under control. It was hard though. He'd been working so hard, and now it looked like someone had decided to get in his way without so much of an explanation. It couldn't help but enrage him when the entire reason he was doing it was for the sake of growing to help the planet as a whole. He was constantly forcing himself to keep calm as he made his way to the front, a guild receptionist greeting him politely once he got there. "Hello. How can I help you today?" they asked, with Ben's card already out and at the ready, showing his status as both an apostle and a rank 1 adventurer. "I'm here to talk to the guild leader. They should be expecting me." Just one moment. I haven't heard about him having any meetings set up today." "Oh, we don't have one, but seeing as how he intentionally suppressed a quest from a rank 1 adventurer without any sort of explanation and tried to keep the entire thing a secret, he absolutely should have known I was coming to see him." He said it loudly, wanting others to hear, and it got some murmurs around him. The guild generally wouldn't reject a quest from such a high-ranked individual, but to do it without so much as an explanation as to why was unreasonable. Unauthorized use of content. If you find this story on Amazon, report the violation. Stating that so clearly made the employee look uncomfortable as well, but they tried to keep in control of the situation given they only had his side of the explanation. "I'm sorry to hear you've had problems. If you just take a seat for a moment, I'll get someone to you as soon as I can find one who might be able to tell you what happened." "Oh, thanks, but I'm not really one to wait around." Without waiting for a response, he left the line and started walking towards the office he wanted. He'd already seen in their head where it was and that the guild leader was in. He wasn't going to wait for them to give him the runaround, even as different employees caught on to what he was doing and followed to try and stop him. "Sir, no matter your rank, you still need to wait," one said, grabbing his arm and ending up pulled along as Ben ignored him, forcing them to look back to the others. "I'll need some assistance for this one." More hands grabbed onto him, but with no luck slowing him down. With all of his awakenings tied into the potions he drank and his near-constant training, he was simply too strong for even an average adventurer to stop, let alone the staff, and when one eventually resorted to trying a sleep spell on him, only for it to fail too, Did they realize how out of their league he was? That didn't keep them from trying though, as he eventually made it to the door, kicking it in and forcing the one inside to rise to their feet. What in the name of Dash? Ben Hef? Rank 1 adventurer, he said loudly, finally forcing off the ones that had clung to him. That would be the name you need to worry about right now, seeing as how you decided to get in the way of my quest without so much as a word why. The answer got him a glare, but Ben didn't care as he walked over to the desk, and seeing there was no seat on the other side of it for him to use, made a point of materializing one for whatever intimidation factor that would give before sitting down. So, Mr. Bigshot Man in charge, why exactly did you decide to cancel my quest while telling the guild I put it through to just pretend nobody accepted? Still glaring, the guild head looked over his shoulder and waved away those who were standing at the door before focusing back on Ben. Misallocation of guild resources. You've already put in one inappropriate quest in the past, and I'm aware of how many of our books you've had sent for. You can't simply do what you want and get away with it. Perhaps consider some of your actions while I'm being lenient and get out of here before I strip you of your rank and call the guards. More rage flooded Ben's heart, not for what he'd been told but for the real reason he'd seen in the man's memories as to why his quest had been stopped, leaving him to materialize a knife and plunge it into the desk in front of him while speaking in a cold voice. High Vitality Enhancement, Level 0. High Spearmanship, Level 0. What are you? The guild leader tried to ask as Ben materialized another knife, once more plunging it through the wood in front of him all the way to its hilt as he went on. Air Augmentation, Level 8. Thrust Enhancement, Level 4. Pain Resistance, Level 4. Laceration Resistance, Level 3. Ben went on, listing skills and levels while materializing more knives to stab into the desk as the guild leader understood what Ben was doing. Aside from the obvious intimidation, he was listing the other's entire status. And finally, Cooking Level 0, he finished, plunging in a 10th knife. You can't lie to me, and you sure as fuck can't hide anything from me, so why don't we get to the truth of the matter and the reason you blatantly abused your position? Your god asked you to not allow my request to go through. It was a fact that had him fuming as he resisted the urge to track them down to get whatever experience he could to his sacrilege then and there. He didn't know why, but the one the guild leader had worshipped had seen fit to step in to stop Ben from getting his quest, but there were clearly no good intentions behind it, with the guildmaster not faltering. Fine, that's correct, but now that you know is all the more reason to give up. If the gods don't want you to do it, then do yourself a favor and try to atone for whatever got you in their bad books and get the hell out of my office. No, it's not gods, it's God, singular, and as the leader of one of the most prominent global organizations on the planet, it's your job to remain impartial. You can't be letting others influence your choices when it comes to the people under you. We're not talking about some random other, we're talking about a deity. Say what you will and threaten me how you'd like. You won't be seeing me changing my mind. Ben had to stop himself from hurting the man. Too many of his minds were edges away from materializing, and others were prepared to actualize, since he could inflict mental damage that way without leaving wounds, but he held himself back in the end. Just barely. He was enraged in ways he rarely had been before, and he was being mistreated for reasons he didn't know, but that wasn't an excuse to go so far as to maim or murder a person. But he also couldn't do nothing. If he didn't let out a bit of his anger, then he was going to explode, and since he could see there was no changing the other's mind, he ripped from him all of the mana his body held without another word, forcing him to mana exhaustion before using his magic to turn the other's clothing to dust and materialized bottles and alcohol to fill the room, pouring it over him while he was passed out at his desk before walking out back to the main hall and enchanting one of his bracelets to act as a microphone for all to hear. Man, I can't believe the guild leader is passed out naked and drunk at work. I knew he was unprofessional, but I wasn't expecting it to be that bad. With how loud he was, it got plenty of attention, and while most eyes ended up on him, more than a few went to see what he was talking about while he left the building to whatever chaos would unfold, instead speaking up to the sky. Myriad, you better be free right now. I have a pretty big complaint, and I'm expecting a meeting with the gods as soon as possible to get it resolved. One decided to get their believer to keep me from putting a quest through. Seeing as how I'm pretty damn unhappy about that, I want to get that resolved before I go to burn their church down. Okay, thanks. He tried to sound calm with his god, but the moment he went off, Ben punched the guild wall, feeling stone crack under his attributes and the significant buff he was getting from his ill intent before walking away to some quiet alley so he could sit on the ground, lost in his thoughts. No matter what I try to do, someone always has to get in the way. His anger slowly gave way to his frustration and he covered his eyes to block out the world, waiting for Myriad to get back to him. All right. He forced his mind up as he'd done plenty of times in the past, making his way to his god's realm where more than a few were already waiting. It wasn't the full pantheon of the planet, but it was also more than just the small handful he'd had dealing with him any time he wanted to discuss payment. With the group ending with the gods he was close to, Analia included, all there and waiting while the rest he'd usually have to deal with had shown up along with the one who'd specifically gotten in the way of him putting in his quest with a handful of others, with Fix speaking first, looking exceptionally tired. All right, let's get this over with, he muttered in a way that seemed a bit less controlled than usual, with that deity already prepared for a long, exhausting conversation. Now Duna, would you be so kind as to explain just what your intentions were and the reason for your actions? What's to explain? She asked as Ben looked at her, seeing someone who appeared to be a mixed breed of one of the elven species with one of the avian that would normally have left Ben to wonder if they were one of the ascended gods if not for the fact that they'd intentionally gotten in his way to make his day and life harder. It's my job to guide my believers in the way I view as right. Is it not? This boy looks at all of us and only sees what he can get. Why should he waste the world's resources to grow even stronger? I don't know about the rest of you, but the more he does, the more I'm loath to see him standing among us. He's not yours to judge, Nair spoke back coldly. Nor is it your place to decide that for the rest of us. I'm not alone and you all know it, she told him, turning to the others. Look at how he acts. You already know what he's trying to do with this. Do you really want him coming even closer to ascending? It was clear the answer was largely a no, even if some looked indifferent and that small back and forth had made it clear just why they were getting in his way. While he hadn't been too open about it, he also hadn't gone out of the way to try and hide the fact that what he was attempting was for the sake of speeding through the rest of his jobs, and it seemed that fact had made its way to the gods of the world, with more than a few who wanted to stop it at all costs. It doesn't matter what you do or don't want, Analia told them, hints of anger in her voice. This is a massive overstepping of bounds. And why, all to get in the way of a mortal you find difficult. Disgusting. Analia, we can't just let the system be exploited so thoroughly. Another tried, being cut off before he could go on by Nair. Why not? Whatever benefits are to be gained from it are no loss to us, and the entire point of its creation was to help people grow. The very idea of getting in the way of that is ridiculous. Are you all so afraid of seeing a god of sacrilege? Because if so, I'd say it's your own actions that would be provoking anything worth fearing. God of sacrilege and greed, another scoffed. Look at how much he already tries to take us for each time he feels a little clever. Do you think that's going to stop if he gains genuine power over us? I'll admit he has some accomplishments, but they're nothing I'd want to see him standing beside us as equals for. Support creative writers by reading their stories on Royal Road, not stolen versions. Nothing you'd want to. Are you an idiot? Hellori yelled. Whatever issues you may have with his personality, you'd have to be blind not to see all he's done for the world. We might not even be here to have this fight if not for him. Not to mention everything he's been making to help. And are you all really so used to not having to pay mortals for their work that you're going to stand in his way like a bunch of children because of it? Nair spat, personally offended as a god who gained faith specifically because of people who used their skills to make and sell their wares. Who's actually the greedy one between the two? Easy to say, but there's no denying the boy tricked us all into spending so much of our faith. As payment for saving the world, Myriad told them. Or did you all forget about how vital the planet is if you want to keep gaining faith, what with it being the home of every believer you have? All of you enough? Fix sighed, raising a hand to try and get control of things. Regardless of how anyone feels, Duna was wrong for this, but more than a few are unsatisfied with Apostle Ben. With the small bit of time we had to discuss this, the majority of the more impartial gods among us have come to a conclusion we hope will be acceptable to all parties. Oh, this should be good, Hellori muttered while Fixed only looked more exhausted. Hellori, please. We won't get in the way of Ben sending his quests. All we ask is that since he has a talent for gaining experience, he use it to actually help the world, including the contenders of the planet in his parties, as well as helping the third-tier skill holders complete their jobs. The effects of such a thing could be massive. It could potentially help more awaken to their own godhood in the time we have left, and if we're exceptionally lucky, might even get some of the third-tier's levels in their skills. And all at the low cost of my apostle's health and time, Myriad spoke. This is your solution? One of us steps in the way of another god's believers, and instead of putting it right, we put them to work. It's for the planet -1 tried before being cut off. And that makes it okay to exploit a mortal? If it means the rest get to live, then yes. Tensions were only growing higher while Ben listened, breaking his silence for the first time since he'd gone up. I give up. Those 3 words quieted the crowd, with the ones against him elated by it. After feeling like they'd been forced to dance in the palm of his hand since he'd started making himself useful, it seemed they'd finally gotten something out of him while making him back down, leaving the gods on his side with their own complicated feelings. They didn't want things to go in such a way. They didn't want their fellow gods to exploit a mortal because of whatever grievances they held. But whatever the outcome, the suggestion would be good for the world as a whole. If more could reach the 3rd tier because of that, and if any already at that tier could manage to gain just a single level to their skills, the planet would immediately be better off for it, with Fixed in particular looking relieved that things had gone so smoothly. Thank you, Apostle Ben. In that case, we'll begin contacting the relevant parties, and dash. You've misunderstood? Ben cut in, looking exactly like he felt, tired and done with it all. I give up on everything. You all think I'm greedy when all I've ever wanted is to be paid for my work? Well, I'm done. I'm not helping people level because you all decided to corner me into it, and I'm done making things for this planet. I'm done trying to do my best to ensure this doomed garbage world survives the invasion when even after all I've managed you all still see me as nothing more than a tool to be exploited than an equal worthy of proper consideration. What are you talking about? Another god asked. Like it or not, you live on this world. You don't just get to quit. Watch me. Without another word, he pulled his mind from the realm, feeling more than finished with the planet by that point as he started heading home. The first thing he did when he got back down was use his sacrilege to block the gods of the world from his thought, trading whatever they may have wanted to say for a host of notifications. Deny all. He wasn't in the mood to hear from anyone, be they the gods he liked or not. Since coming back, he'd worked so hard to help the world. From his mana bracelets he'd made to the buffing ones he was in the middle of testing, to the materializers he'd perfected and his current experiments to enhance a person's attributes, but all of that still wasn't enough. So many of the gods of the world still saw him as nothing but a pain who expected to be paid for his work instead of giving it freely just because he was mortal, and it left them to see him as nothing more than a list of discoveries to be exploited, and he was done dealing with it all. He'd been working himself to the bone to try and grow to help the world, and still, all they saw him as after all he'd accomplished was nothing more than a convenient bit of experience to be enjoyed, leaving him to question why he was even trying so hard in the first place. The world wasn't his problem. Who cared how doomed it was? He'd been trying his best the entire time, and it still wasn't enough to get any real recognition that he didn't have to fight tooth and nail for. Why continue putting his body and soul through so much when that was the only reward waiting for him in the end? It was a series of thoughts that echoed through his many minds on his entire way home, making his way through Analia and hoping the entire way he wouldn't be stopped by anyone he knew, getting that small mercy as he arrived back at the shop, with the question of what to do next. He hadn't had a proper break in forever, and he'd meant what he'd told the gods. Why try so hard for the planet if that was his reward? Someone else could make tools and weapons, all he needed to do was relax. Unauthorized usage. This tale is on Amazon without the author's consent. Report any sightings. I feel like I haven't drawn in a while. Why not do that for a bit? It was as good a solution as any, and he knew exactly how he wanted to do it, so with a plan for however long he was stuck on that planet firm in his thoughts, he went home, going around to the backyard as he began materializing. Using his phenomenal level of skill and power, he bent the mana he held to create only a few simple things. A lawn chair, some sunglasses, a sketchbook, and some pencils before laying down to get to work, taking what felt like his first real day off in ages. Still deny all. Every now and then he'd receive notifications again as different gods tried to talk to him, but he continued to ignore them in favor of continuing his drawing, adding another filled sketchbook to the pile after his few hours out there before materializing another to begin doodling in. Whatever they wanted, he didn't care. He didn't want to keep putting in effort for a planet that just wanted to exploit him. Why even bother? Better to focus on enjoying the bit of peace he could take for himself. And despite the small, nagging voice in the back of his head telling him he was being unproductive and wasting his time, it felt good. He hadn't been able to overfill his soul during his quest, and now it was one of the longest times in weeks he'd put it off, not feeling any strain nor injury in that intangible part of himself that made him question why he'd even tried so hard to begin with. Why put himself through agony to finish the job faster? And looking at the future, why even be willing to die for that world? That was still the crux of it in the end. All he'd done since getting back had been for the sake of growing stronger, and the decision to quit was like a weight lifting from his shoulders. That planet wasn't his responsibility. By any reasonable judgment it was the gods', and if that was the case then let them screw over their believers while the masses let them with smiles on their faces. Why did he have to get stronger to try and help? Aside from the fact that the gods of this world are absolutely not going to be able to beat OWN, which means the invasion is going to end in our loss. And, no, I'm not thinking about it. This is officially not my problem. I'm the forgotten summoned, the nobody that nobody wanted. Even if they didn't know I was trying to get stronger to try and help save the world, it's been one thing after another ever since I arrived here. No matter what I do or what I pull off, no god wants to pay me fairly for my work, and I'm just tired of it all. However things turn out is officially their problem instead of mine. He tried to silence his nagging thoughts as his attention was focused back on his drawings, the pencil in his hand working on something more abstract while he used his magic to keep it sharp, even as more thoughts came in. I don't want to die for this planet, and I don't want the people I care about to die either. Damn it. So what does that mean? I just give in, let the gods get what they want from me without a fight, and then still probably die trying to protect this entire stupid world? His feelings were a mess, but as he asked himself that, the arc of his pencil froze in his hand, the question bringing a different one to mind. Why should I have to die to save the world anyway? Why not just save the bits I care about? He felt a line of thoughts he hadn't previously let himself touch on burrow into his mind and whisper in his ear. A truth to it all he couldn't escape. Saving the world was probably impossible. Saving himself and a handful of people who mattered to him, though? Would that even be a challenge? He even already had ideas that could work. When he'd discussed the prospect of some alternative other than killing OWN when he'd gotten back with the gods, he'd suggested a few he knew would be doomed to fail, but that was only when working on the scale of trying to save the planet. On a significantly smaller scale, though, would there even be any real problems? Construct a vessel with time enchantments on it to keep the occupants frozen within while getting Ogilt to transport them to another galaxy, and it might have actually been feasible. Ben would have to constantly move mana from the souls he created into the Great Spirit, but there was no reason it couldn't be done, and regardless of how wrong it would be, if Ogilt was against it, Ben was confident he could take him over with hive mind to force the other to his will. There were other issues with it too, how long it might take to get somewhere safe from the demon's god and gathering the people he cared about, with both being affected by just how many he'd be willing to bring with him and what he'd need to do to make it happen. Thera and her entire family were obvious, and without much thought, he knew he'd want to bring every human on the planet too, regardless of how close or not he was with some of them, and if he was bringing one entire group of summon, then he might as well take another. It would do no harm for the Grey to feel in his debt if he took every member of their kind he could off of that doomed world. And who else? He liked Sakhel and Raylia enough that he'd want to save them. Really, he'd choose to take her entire village, adding a few hundred dryads to the list, and why stop at just one village? He'd obviously need to bring the demidemons too, with that thought growing to all of Myriad's believers since there were still less than 1,000 in total. Yuzu too, though since she was Jake's wife that should have been obvious, but it did raise the point that he'd need to try and bring at least a few of the people everyone else he would take was close to as well. And when he thought about the list of people he liked well enough on the planet that he didn't want to die, that meant the number was only going to grow. But no matter how many mortals he decided he wanted to grab in the end, he believed he could make it manageable. There was no way their numbers would be above 10,000, and if he did make a vessel to help hold them all, he could manipulate not only the flow of time but space as well, keeping the size reasonably small. The bigger issue was that some of the gods of the world might stop him, but so long as he built it, he could get the space spirits of the world to bring him everyone else he would want to take along the day he was ready to go and escape before any deity would notice. That did bring another obvious point though, the gods. He was comfortable saying there were 4 he'd want to save, maybe 5 if he included Jagal since she'd always been good to him, but that would be harder to deal with the best idea he had at the moment being to trick them into descending upon their believers before trapping them to bring along. Myriad would be extra difficult, but Ben would find a way, although all of them would need to have at least a couple hundred of their believers brought along too, with the last question being what he'd even do after. This book is hosted on another platform. Read the official version and support the author's work. He would in essence be kidnapping gods and mortals alike to leave the rest of the planet to die. Even if he succeeded and got to a new planet far away from whatever demons that galaxy held, how many of them would be grateful? Even if he saved a few, he'd be tearing plenty away from friends and family, leaving them behind to deal with whatever horrors were left waiting once the 3rd wave went through. Just how would thousands of potential people react to that? How many would forgive him even among the ones he cared about? A question that didn't really matter. They could all hate him, but they'd be alive to hate him. Wasn't that good enough? In whatever world they'd end up building, he could go down in history as a monster, and that would be fine if it meant there were people alive to view him as such. And aren't I uncomfortably well equipped to help build a new world if it comes to that? I have the near total of this planet's magical knowledge in my head, and I can read up on every other book worth reading too. I'm one of the best at making things on this entire planet. If I combine that with the millions of points of mana I can pull from my jacket, then I could have a real settlement made in a day, plus my materializers could keep us all fed during initial setup. Hell, they could do the job for years if it came to it for some reason, and I could get the Greys' help too. No reason they couldn't chip in on city planning if I'm saving some of their people, and it's not like I'd stop working on the summoning spell. Plus, that would actually be better for them. I know they're having trouble finding a backup world they'd want to contact if this one falls, but a brand new planet should be pretty tolerable. Shouldn't it? And given the gods of this one have all had to live among others, I'd at least say the ones I'd want to bring with me are probably mellow enough that they won't have any of those insane restrictions that gods used to ruling their worlds alone or in small groups would have. That does leave the issue of whatever gods already exist on whatever world we'd land on, since we'd need something that already has life and an ecosystem. But as long as we get somewhere that hasn't started to uplift a group, well, I'm confident in my negotiation skills. I'll make it work. Especially if whatever gods are young enough. Actually, finding a planet like that should be the goal. Nair said they're basically infants or animals. No reason not to let the ones I drag along raise whichever ones we find. The more he thought about it, the better the idea felt. Let the people he loved live, let himself live, and abandon this planet that viewed him as nothing more than a resource. All at the cost of everyone he'd leave behind. That was the key issue with that entire line of thought, but one he was happy to try and ignore as a larger part of him tried to work out the logistics, even with one question still in his head. Could he go through with it? Deny. Whether he could or not, he had months to decide, and it was never too soon to start planning, so as he continued to draw he refined the idea, feeling all he'd learned on the planet click into place so he could abandon it. Deny. While part of him continued his planning, thinking about how he'd escape the world if it came to it, the rest of him focused on his art. His pile of sketchbooks had long gone above his sitting height, and the sky was beginning to dim, leaving him to take off the glasses he'd made as he switched mediums, materializing some wood but treating it like clay as he used his magic to sculpt it. Altering the consistency of the material he'd made, he felt it shift and bend in his hands the way it never would have naturally, indulging in the sensation as he worked it into a small figure of himself before changing it again to a mask, and a tree from there, and so on repeatedly as more time went by until it was dark enough out that he accepted it was time to stop for the night and went inside to cook dinner, getting a warm welcome. "Welcome back. You're earlier than I was expecting," Thera said when she heard him come in, perking up from the game she was playing with her aunt, while Sonia smiled at him as well. "Productive day?" "No, not really. I actually spent a lot of it in the backyard relaxing." The answer got him some strange looks. He wasn't one to just do nothing and relax, at least not without reason, but he didn't give more of an explanation, instead moving to the kitchen to begin sorting out dinner for the night as he pulled ingredients down to begin his cooking. Seeing something more was at play though, the other two followed, Sonia speaking first and sounding concerned. "Is everything okay, Ben?" "Kind of. I mean, not really, but nothing unexpected at this point, but it worked out, so I don't need to worry about working anymore." Maybe tomorrow I'll focus on my cooking. I could go off and see what ingredients I can secure and then go wild with it." "Yeah, that sounds like a pretty nice idea, doesn't it?" "And that also wasn't an answer," Thera told him. "What happened?" "All right. Long story short, the gods got in my way again and then immediately tried to take advantage of me when I've been doing my best for the stupid planet, and I'm sick of it, so I told them I'm done. I've officially retired from doing things. I'm not awakening people. I'm not making things, and I'm not trying to save this world. The Forgotten One is officially forgetting about whatever problems this planet has and focusing on using his last few months of life for himself." While Sonia's eyes held concern and doubt at his statement, Thera's were nothing but excitement. She was trying and failing to hide, and he knew exactly why for both, even without looking into their heads. The first didn't really believe he could stop doing things, not given the way he normally lived, and as for Thera, this was a result she could happily get behind. If you stumble upon this narrative on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen from Royal Road. Please report it. She'd never wanted him putting his life on the line for the waves, and she was absolutely against the idea that he should sacrifice himself to try and kill the demon's god. And even if she viewed him achieving the levels he thought he needed for it as impossible in the time they had, if he was willing to quit, then that just made things easier. He wasn't going to fault her for that mentality though. It wasn't like he wanted her to put herself in harm's way either, and if he'd already decided to quit, then who was he to decide how anyone else might feel about that fact? No, anyone could hold whatever opinion they would. It didn't matter. While they were still processing his answer, he placed their meals down in front of them before taking a seat himself to dig in, trying to enjoy what he'd made but barely being able to taste it. His head was still a mess. He was still mad, he was still frustrated, and more than anything else, he was still planning on what he might do in the future with all of the chaos such thoughts brought him. "Hey guys, would you? Sorry. Ignore me." He'd almost asked if they'd leave the world with him if he could and abandon the war altogether, but that was stupid for a number of reasons. He was sure that more than a few gods were watching. He didn't want to let any of them know he was thinking about that, lest they try and get in his way again, and just as importantly, he didn't intend to give Thera, Sonia, or anyone he knew a choice if he did it. Let them hate him for it if they would, but asking them now wouldn't change that when he fully intended for the people he loved to live. They could both see there was more on his mind than that too, but left it at that, giving him the room to process his feelings as the evening wore on. Thera was nestled in his arms by the time they got to bed that night, seeming perfectly content while he in return stared at the ceiling above with the question of what he was even going to do for the night. Normally he would talk to the gods to pass the time in the evenings, but he was still in no mood to see any of them, but he still wasn't in a hurry to sleep either, not wanting to deal with whatever hell his subconscious would see fit to put him through. Deny. He had another option though, one he'd never actually bothered to test. Supposedly, during his last job run, he'd gained the ability to lucid dream, a skill he'd never had the opportunity to test because of how he'd usually spend his nights, and one he didn't even know for sure if he'd be able to pull off without practice first, but decided that then was as good a time as any to see if it would work, and doing his best with that goal in mind, closed his eyes and tried to retreat into himself. It was a strange feeling, slowly falling to sleep. He could feel it happening and tried to keep his awareness of it, and that seemed to work. By the time he was dreaming 1,000 things at once, he felt fully aware that it was in fact a dream, and his fractured psyche took control of the scene, bringing it to order as he changed it all into a single area reminiscent of Myriad's realm. Just an infinite, empty expanse for him to work in. Which only leaves the question of what to do now then. He sighed, not seeing anything to really make it worthwhile compared to just staying awake. I guess I need to do this to let my body and mind get some rest. But whatever, I guess I'll just keep planning. Since it was within the confines of his mind, he was able to imagine things into being, and doing so spent the night creating potential structures for a vessel to hold thousands along with the enchantments he'd need to place to power it. All for the goal of his potential escape.
Denny.
He woke up early the next day and left while both Thera and Sonia still slept, off to do exactly what he'd thought about only the day before, going to get ingredients. He did his best to ignore the shop as he passed through, not wanting to feel any temptation from the things it held, but chose to take the mini-gate to his workshop in Analia rather than pass through Thera's family home to get to the main gate network, and went on from there to do his shopping. With many of the original gate cities at least partially abandoned due to their proximity to invasion points, he used what little knowledge he had of the safe ones to go to a city he'd built the gate for himself, walking through to one that was enjoying a breezy afternoon on a coast. While coastal cities made for an easier route for the terrestrial and aquatic races to meet, it also meant they were valuable regions for trade, telling him that even if he hadn't been there before, their shops and markets would likely be filled with interesting products and ingredients to get his hands on as he started his exploration down the streets, jogging through them to see as much as he could while popping into any shops that caught his eyes. With the rings on his fingers, he wasn't much limited by space either as he went, finding a spice store early on and peppering the shopkeeper with questions as he asked how different ones would be used and what they would be good for before buying a few pounds of every variety that was held to play with later and going on from there. It wasn't long after that he found a fish market to spend some time in too, looking deeply at the options while finding out what he could from the salesman about those strange forms of life. Like the terrestrial side of the planet he lived on, the ecosystem of the aquatic side was a mess as well due to all of the groups that had been scooped up and brought along by their gods, accidentally or intentionally bringing along some of the life of their worlds too, carving out new niches in their new home that was kept constantly out of balance by the sheer virtue of the scale of that change. He couldn't imagine the scale of what had to be near-constant extinction events taking place as what native life there was ended up constantly and repeatedly devastated by the things that were brought, but on the plus side, it gave him plenty of interesting options to choose from before inevitably deciding not to choose at all, instead buying bits of everything. The narrative has been stolen. If detected on Amazon, report the infringement. After all, why not? He was rich, might as well enjoy the benefits all of that money had to offer, especially if it would soon be meaningless. If he stayed and everyone died, then his wealth wasn't going to amount to much, and if he left, then it would be just as meaningless. Actually, if I'm going to abandon this entire planet, then I should probably look into buying everything I can while I can. I'd need to make more voidstone, but it's not like it would hurt to stock up on resources. Seeds especially, maybe some domesticated livestock too. Let's see. Is there anything else? Shouldn't really need tools or raw materials since I can materialize both. It really does just come down to the things I can't make myself, which is a surprisingly slim list, isn't it? I'll just have to keep an eye out, I guess. And then, his thoughts were cut off by his practice. No matter how he was feeling, he still couldn't keep himself from using connect on the people around him for whatever experience it would give, as he subtly looked at the minds around him, and through that practice found one he couldn't ignore as he walked over to a small child sitting quietly in a corner. "Hey kiddo, are you lost? Need some help?" Ben asked, trying to sound kind as the small boy he spoke to looked up and nodded. "All right, why don't we see if we can find your parents then? Okay? Let's go somewhere a bit safer than a street for now. All right?" Again the boy nodded, and Ben took his hand and led him to a nearby shop he'd just left, explaining the situation to the owner inside and leaving them to watch the child as he went back out and ran around the area, stretching out connect until he found the frantic mind he was after. "Hey there. I know where your kid is. He's just this way," he told the worried father out of the blue, getting a grateful yet confused look for the impromptu statement as he made up a lie to explain himself. "You look like him and you looked worried. It was an easy guess. Now come on." Without waiting, he started walking back to the shop, leading the man behind him as they went inside. Drawing the child's eye away from the store owner he was playing with to his parent and running over into the man's waiting arms where he was scooped up. "Thank you so much," the father said, giving a small bow to both Ben and the shop owner before looking at his son. "Say thank you now too, okay?" "Thank you." "It's no problem, happy to help." They exchanged a few more words before leaving, letting Ben get back to his day as new feelings began stabbing into him from that small meeting. If he abandoned the world to its fate, then he'd be abandoning people to die, billions of people, with many of them being children. It was easy to say he didn't care when they weren't around, out of sight, out of mind. But as we walked the streets, was he really willing to leave so many to such a fate? And if not, then what did that mean? Rolling over for the gods so he could take what bits of strength for himself he could while letting them delay him for their own goals? It wasn't like they were wrong that helping so many finish their jobs could benefit them and the world, but helping the third tiers finish their jobs would delay him by weeks or months, possibly longer depending on if any of them had advanced variants to go through, and he was sure that would be true of more than a few, even if he hadn't gotten so lucky himself. So was he willing to just be nothing more than experience for others if it meant he'd still be able to snag some growth for himself? Even if slowed, it would still surely help him on the way to his goals. Deny! His feelings were a mess, so he decided to give up on thinking as best he could, instead doing a few more hours of shopping for whatever interesting things he might find before heading home for the day, continuing to put off the problems of just what he should do in the future. Getting home led to cooking as he put his thoughts to the side. He had plenty of ingredients now and plenty to test, so before the others came home he devoted himself to making all he could, with piles of food ending up in his rings to be taken out in the next days and weeks while the time passed by. He made mental notes of what he liked and what he didn't, and since he had all of the time in the world, decided he'd go back the next day to grab a few more of the ingredients that particularly charmed his palate. He'd need to see if there were any real standouts for Thera and Sonia as well, but that was something he could figure out that night as he put together a tasting menu for them to enjoy for dinner, with the sound of the door opening telling him he wouldn't need to wait long. "Welcome back," he called out as the both of them came in. "You guys worked together today?" It took a second to notice that something was wrong as he focused on their faces, both of them looking complicated in a way that couldn't help but worry him. "What's going on? What's wrong?" It was Sonia who answered, with Thera so against whatever needed to be said that she refused to give it voice. "Ben, last night Analia spoke to us both and dash." "Stop!" He cut her off, holding up his hand. "Don't want to hear it. I'm taking a break from the gods, even the ones I like. Whatever they have to say, well, that can be someone else's problem." "Ben, I really think dash. Is someone dying?" "Well, no. Is the world suddenly going to end in the next week?" "No, but dash." "Then I don't want to hear it. I'm not mad at Analia. I know she was on my side, but I'm just so tired, Sonia. I'm tired of gods and the power they hold over the world, and I'm tired of being treated like something less than them for being mortal. I just need a break from this all." The answer seemed to perk Thera up at least, more than happy to know he wouldn't be giving in so easily when a knock came to their door before anyone could say more, with Sonia deflating as she went to get it. He started plating dinner while she checked, feeling rather proud of the things he'd made and hoped he'd be able to get through the night without any attempt to continue the talk or any notifications from the gods trying to get back in his head, but it seemed that wasn't to be as two more followed her back in. Falk and the far more unexpected Valeria. "The narrative has been stolen. If detected on Amazon, report the infringement." "No. We haven't said anything yet, boy." "Well, Valeria's here, which means Myriad asked her to come, which means she got permission to go through Polinia's home and through the shop, which means both Nair and Analia are also involved, and whatever this is, I don't want to hear it. I'm always told by everyone to take a break, so this is me, enjoying my break. Since you guys came all this way, if you want to join us for dinner then fine. I made plenty. But I'm leaving the second anyone brings up the gods." "Boy, I heard what happened. But dash. Leaving," he said as he walked away, being stopped by Falk's hand on his shoulder. "Would it kill you to listen for just a bit? Maybe I happen to know a bunch of gods would be happier to have the king of sacrilege dead before I can risk ascending. But I guess those particular assholes can be happy now since I've given up on trying." "Ben, Myriad is just worried about you," Valeria told him. "He's not used to not hearing from you, and to be honest, I think he's lonely not having you around. I just need a break. It hasn't even been long since we've spoken. He can handle not hearing from me for a few days or weeks. He's worried about you. I don't know what to tell you. I'm allowed time to myself, and regardless of what so many up there think, the gods aren't entitled to my attention." "But dash. Going now," he said as he ripped himself from his teacher's grasp. "Enjoy the meal. We can all talk when it's not going to be about anyone who's ruling the planet." He rushed out without another word, feeling grateful at least that nobody followed him. Was it really so wrong to just want to get a break from it all? He just wanted to get his mind off the gods and the planet and whatever choice he was going to have to make sooner than later. A choice that only felt harder the more he thought about it. He could abandon the world, He knew he had it in him, but it would hurt. Even if he didn't know them, just walking through Stonewall he was seeing familiar faces, and he knew that even if he really did run off and save thousands in the process, that would barely be anyone. But wasn't that better than the slim chance he had of saving everyone? A chance that only ever shrunk with each time the gods saw what he had and decided they wanted to use him for their own benefits. I don't know. His feet stopped with the thought, and heaving a sigh he turned around, going back home. Everyone was still there by the time he arrived, talking in the living room, and while they started to get up when he got back he waved them down. You win. I'm going to talk to them. Thera was the only one who didn't look relieved by that. Feeling the brief bit of hope he'd given her that he'd stop putting himself in danger slip away, but it wasn't like he'd resolved to give in. He was just going to talk, and that would either make his mood better or worse. He'd know once he was done suffering through it. So going to bed, Ben laid down, closed his eyes, and forced his mind to his god's realm, wanting to see for himself just why it was so important for them to talk to him that they couldn't even give him a few days of peace. All right, what the hell did you guys want so badly that you couldn't even let me have a few days to be pissed? Ben said as he arrived, with Fixed getting most of his glare while Myriad floated to the side. Seriously, if you know anything about mortals, then you should know that plenty of us don't like being disturbed while we're in a bad mood. I would just like the opportunity to talk, Ben, the stone god told him. Well, I'm here, so get talking. He had no intention of being polite, but the deity before him paid it no mind, having expected as much from the beginning as he brought forth a chair to take a seat, trying to look softer for the angry mortal. I know you're unhappy, Dash. Wow, excellent detective work on your part. And I understand why, he sighed. But all of us are just trying to do the best we can. I'm trying to do the best I can. I've in essence been put in charge of leading discussions involving you for a while now for the simple reason I'm impartial to your actions in a way so many others up here aren't, either loving or hating you, and tied into that is the greater need to look at the world as a whole. There's no way to make everyone happy with everything we do. The goal is usually more to keep anyone from being completely miserable. Failed a bit on that front, didn't you? Of course, what do I matter? I'm just some lowly mortal, not worthy of the consideration of all you high and mighty gods that so graciously rule this doomed world. The sarcasm was thick in his voice, but again Fixed ignored it, looking Ben in the eyes. Yes, we have failed you there, but I'd like you to try and understand why. Regardless of what some of the more vocal gods might say in the matter, Ben, I actually do feel a decent level of respect for you. In your time here you've worked hard, harder than most, and your skills and talent have blossomed exceptionally under your efforts. But you're just one man. Through the growth exploits you've found for yourself you'll grow even farther, but you could also use that potential to help others go beyond their limits as well. No one can force you into it, Ben, but I'm asking you. Please help the contenders and the third tiers of the world grow. You know what pissed me off the most about you first asking that? It wasn't that you wanted me to help at all. It's that you lot have clearly never once listened to me in any of the times I've dealt with you. How so? I work, I get paid. It's as simple as that, but instead of trying to negotiate or make any sort of offer in exchange for my efforts and discoveries, you waited till some random god got in my way and then tried to weasel yourselves in. I understand why you may not have been pleased with that, but this costs you nothing, and it would appease the more vocal among us who are upset about how paying you out your experience last time went. Leave them and leave you alone. It's not about that, it never was. There hasn't been a single time I've succeeded at anything that I didn't need to fight tooth and nail to be properly compensated for my work. Some of you felt like I tricked you with that last one? Yeah, I tricked you, but would you have rewarded me otherwise? At the time I said I deserved to be gifted in levels and blessings from all of the gods of the world, and you know what? I was right then and I'm right now. If you don't think saving not only the planet but also all of you as well was worth that much, then all of your desire to hold on to your faith makes you greedier than I could ever be. The timing of it though, Dash. What, you think that's my only example? The braces I've made, the ultra-rare and legendary items I've been flooding the world with, the fact I discovered that demons had been integrated into the system, and the fact that I've personally helped awaken hundreds already on top of piles of other things I've done, and yet still, all the gods of this world see is a person to exploit. How many people are alive and have benefited from me? Hell, let's get a bit more personal. How many of your people are alive or have benefited from my existence on this planet? Have lived through the second wave after being awakened by me or survived a demon attack with one of my weapons in their hands? You want to know why I'm not going to do this fixed? It's because so many of you up here see the fact that I don't respect you in a way you all think you're due, and they seem to think that makes me lower than any other mortal when all I'm doing is giving you the same courtesy I'd give any other person I'd meet. My work and my efforts aren't appreciated, and every god who thinks it's because I'm not humble enough needs to take an actual look at themselves. So you failed. I'm not helping the planet anymore, and frankly, this conversation has killed the only bit of wavering I'd felt on the matter. For a beat, Fixed was silent, taking in what Ben had said before a notification went out between them to break it. Support creative writers by reading their stories on Royal Road, not stolen versions. This isn't changing my mind. It's not supposed to, he sighed. It's to show that I don't disagree with you, and for what little it's worth. I appreciate the efforts you've put towards this world, and to hopefully buy me a few more minutes of your time without you storming off. Fine. Thank you. I'll be back shortly. He left them there, only Ben and Myriad still in the realm as the apostle slumped down. Man, what a pain in the ass, he muttered before turning to his god. So what's up then, Myriad? Worrying about you, he said, sounding hurt. You've never cut me off like that before. I was concerned. Ugh, sorry, you know it wasn't because of you. It's like I said, I just needed a break from everything. Well, a bit more than that. Hypothetical question for you. If I was to abandon this planet entirely, would you come along? That doesn't feel particularly hypothetical right now. Super hypothetical. It's not like I have a spaceship. No. Just a space spirit and the ability to pour infinite volumes of mana into him. Wow, absolutely never considered that. How devious of you, Myriad. Now answer the question. Ben, if you could save yourself, then I'd be thrilled, but I now have hundreds of people giving me faith on this world. I couldn't just abandon them. Oh, no need to worry about that. If I leave, I'm kidnapping all of them and bringing them along. Hypothetically, of course. Anyway, Ben went on, changing the subject to give his god time to think things over. What's been happening up here while I've been having my break? It's been great for me personally. I've worked on my art in a way I haven't done in ages and bought all sorts of new ingredients on top of experimenting with a bunch of new dishes. Honestly, if I hadn't spent the time so incredibly pissed, it would have been a nice couple days. How nice for you, Myriad said dryly. It's been a nightmare of meetings and arguments up here. Why? What's going on? You. They were obviously about you and how things worked out. Hel, Nair and Helori both basically took charge of the crafting and knowledge gods to force the others to try and fully understand the scope of what you've done for the world so far in terms of how projections for casualties have ended up alone. Considering how the first wave ended up, I feel a bit complicated about that. That wasn't being considered, only your own efforts. When looking at all you've made and accomplished, they've made a fairly compelling point that you're the single greatest factor in keeping losses so low, and with a few of your latest inventions, if you stop making things, we'll have a noticeable drop in our odds of surviving the third wave. And I'm sure plenty up here still didn't care. Well, what matters is that a lot did. Just all the awakenings you'd helped with can't be understated, Ben. For that fact alone, entire cities still exist. Regardless of how others might feel, the gods who know you want to see you getting the appreciation you're due. Well, thanks. I'll take that into consideration when deciding if I'm going to abandon the planet. Hypothetically. A thin smile on his lips from the back and forth. With those final words, Fixed reappeared in the realm and Ben turned his eyes back to him. Well then, come back with a compelling argument for my help. Perhaps. The unexpected flood of notifications left him to pause as he processed them all, neither having expected to get something like that or been prepared for it, nor what it meant. If it was what it sounded like, then he'd just received something equivalent to a tower blessing, one given by the gods of the world who ruled over those with passive magics. A completely unexpected boon, big enough that he felt himself soften just slightly at the idea of doing what they wanted, but not enough for him to give in. It was great, but was it worth the weeks or months he'd be losing out on to do what they wanted? He didn't know, but he wanted to see what the god who'd given it had to say. So what's that supposed to be about? To show you that there are gods in this world who really do appreciate you, Ben. The passive gods especially will never forget what you've done for their peoples. He wanted to say that if that was the case, then getting their collective blessing shouldn't have come as a result of him giving up on the world, but held his tongue on that matter, saying something else instead. So now that I've gotten it, I should just do what you want, should I? No. Take it as a show of sincerity and a request to be given a chance to talk things through. You were right before. I'll do what you say I should have from the very beginning. I would like the chance to negotiate for your help. You want to try and negotiate now? Is there any reason not to? A good reason for Ben was that he comfortably felt like he already had a foot out the door when it came to life on that planet. Agreeing would mean staying and committing to helping instead of just taking whoever he felt like and running off to the first safe planet he could find. It would mean taking the hit and slowing down his growth where plenty of gods still didn't like him, and it would mean ultimately putting his life on the line. Wouldn't it be better and easier on him to just turn it all down and run off with the people he cared about? His minds flashed to people he didn't know. Faces of those he'd never shared a word with but passed on the street each day, and he sighed. Fine, let's negotiate. What are the odds I can get some more blessings for my work then? You said the ones you gave me were to show that I am at least somewhat appreciated and sorry, but I fully intend to take them as such, not partial payment. I'd expect no less, but as for other blessings, it's unlikely. Not enough remaining gods like me enough to want to give in, huh? Partially, but not exactly. The mind gods seemed willing to an extent when I spoke to them, but not many of the ones that qualify as such are particularly powerful. They'd feel the hit more than most. As for the crafting gods, well, they seem like they'd be happy to, but they'd prefer you acquire it a different way. What? How? I'm sure you're clever enough to take a guess. I'll think about it. It wasn't like he didn't have an idea. Nair had been pretty motivated he'd do something that would land him their collective blessing before the first wave, but he pushed that thought to the side for the moment. He hadn't actually expected the request to be accepted, and it seemed the Fixed was used to him enough by that point to understand that as he waited for a real offer while Ben put his thoughts together, trying to figure out what would be best for him. If he was staying on the planet, then he still needed to awaken his two skills, and he still needed to grow further, meaning he needed to think about how to compensate for how slowed he was about to be trying to help the third tiers and how to ensure that whatever he got would still help him in the long run. As he mind flashed through his current job options before he spoke again. All right, first off and non-negotiable, I need the guy currently in charge of the Adventurers Guild fired. He began, holding up a hand before Fixed could say anything. I'm not going to deny I'm being a bit petty, but there's a far bigger reason here for that. A person in charge of one of the largest organizations on the planet cannot be being swayed by the random whims of any god, especially not a multinational organization like that. He's proven he's not fit for the role, and that needs to be rectified. I understand, and I don't disagree. That at least I can confirm will be done. I assume there's more though. Yes. Second, and also non-negotiable, despite what you've already said, I want Duna's blessing. This one is entirely me being petty. Can I ask why? Because as a rule, I intend to get a blessing from any god that tries to screw me over. While I'm personally hoping it will one day act as a nice little deterrence factor, for now, it really is just to make a point, and if my help really is as important as you think, then a single blessing from one god shouldn't be too much to ask. I'll discuss that with the others, but it might be a harder sell. Giving a blessing isn't easy no matter how casual we might make it look. What? Do you think speeding through jobs is? Is it not? If I was just going to be helping second tiers to finish their jobs, then yeah, honestly it would be pretty easy. Third tier jobs are different though. The way I finish them involves pulling massive volumes of mana into myself, and aside from a pretty significant amount of pain it causes, more than once I've damaged my soul doing it. There is absolutely a cost to this to me that doesn't make what you're asking some easy thing. Plus, that's not to mention that doing that kills my mana growth rate. There's actually a lot of personal negatives to me doing this. Fixed was silent for a moment, neither having known or expected such a thing, and it forced him to consider the request more before answering. A case of theft. This story is not rightfully on Amazon. If you spot it, report the violation. All right? I can't promise it, but I'll at least do my best to push for it. As I talk to the others, But I assume you have something more than just paying out your grievances? Well, yeah, let's get to the meat of this then. I currently have at least 33 jobs, and I'll almost certainly get some advanced options after completing a few too. Let me finish most of those and then I'll leave, what, 15 options after? That should cover the 12 third tiers as well as leave some room for if any of them got advanced options, and I'll bring whoever you want into my first few parties. Wait, actually, scratch part of that. 11 third tiers. I refuse to help Rook no matter what you say, and I won't be helping the believers of Duna, Eneth, or Alencia, but that was probably predictable by this point. Not the most surprising, and as for Rook, well, it's not like any of us know where he is at the moment. To be clear, he's not gone forever. Correct. The god asked him with a pointed look while Ben shrugged. A few months, you'll see him again with time to spare before the third wave, provided his immortality isn't a lot weaker than the name would imply. And if it is, well, then the world gets a new god, woo. All right, but this is where I need you to show some willingness to negotiate. As eye-raising as all of the jobs you can access are, doing so many at once will be a challenge no matter what. I'd prefer we spread it out more, both because we'll need time to find and gather certain people as well as to create the chance for people we want to raise to gain access to job options they might not have access to the first time you help them. Ben thought it over. It would slow him down, but all of this was going to slow him down. If he was going to do it, then he could make it work, one way or another. All right, then we'll divide it up. Let's say I'll get to finish 2 jobs before I help each of the third tiers, plus the one I take with them. But for the very first time, I want to finish 4 jobs if we include my current one and then carry whichever third tier with my 5th. That would mean you'd potentially run out of options after helping each third tier once. While we haven't had enough who've finished their jobs before dying in the past, it's likely to think that at least a few of them will have advanced options we'd want you to help with. Alright, I need those terms at least to finish the jobs that would give bonuses to my core skills, so let's say this. While I personally don't think I'd run out of options for helping them, if it looks like I'm getting close, then let's say by the time I only have 5 jobs left, we'll switch things so that I'm helping a third tier for every job until there are none left. If I somehow run out first, then I'll do my best to acquire a skill or skills that would give me new options. Does that sound agreeable? I personally find those terms acceptable. And one thing I want clarified is that the gods will ensure the adventurers, mages, and mind users we're going to need are both gathered and paid the rate I'd intended to give them for their help. You all can cover the cost since you guys are the reason things are happening this way, but I don't want to find out that you're getting them to help for free. Is there a reason for that? Most would jump just to have the chance to finish some of their jobs early. The reason is that I intended to pay them, and even if they don't know that, they should be compensated fully in the way they would have if you all didn't step in. It doesn't matter if they won't be aware, and it doesn't matter if they'll be getting the benefit of finishing some of their jobs sooner than expected. These people should not be getting a worse deal because the gods of this world decided to intervene. All right, I understand. And then what? And then what? Ben wasn't sure what else there really was to ask for, nor why Fix thought there should be until he really considered his request so far. Firing the head of the Adventurers Guild, he viewed as something that just genuinely needed to happen, and the way they'd agreed to organize how he'd go through jobs was infinitely worse still than if the gods hadn't interfered. Ensuring the people he'd need to even make it possible were paid was out of principle but did nothing for him, meaning the only thing he'd really asked for himself until that point was Duna's blessing. Something he absolutely insisted on getting but was still altogether small compared to the loss in time he could expect. Thinking of it that way, it made sense that Fix expected him to want more. Now that he'd lined up what he'd asked for so far, he couldn't help but want more too, with the only question being what? He had so many goals, what could he reasonably ask for to help with any of them? More mana, a level, a skill, a blessing. Okay, yeah, it has to be that last one, doesn't it? It would be the most useful all around. A new blessing, he finally said. I don't care from who, I don't care how inconvenient it is for all of you, and I don't care that I'm already asking for Dunas. One more blessing from any of the countless gods of this world for the time and pain and effort I'm going to have to spend to help these people finish their jobs. Thinking for a second, eventually Fix nodded. All right, the request seems reasonable enough to me. I'll talk it over with the others and we'll let you know. I really don't think I can get more agreeable than this. If the rest are against it, then that's it. I will make that clear. Thank you. In that case, hope you guys don't keep me waiting too long, and if we have a deal then I hope we can start as soon as possible. The second I have agreement from the rest, I'll be setting things up to begin as soon as possible. With this done though, I'll be borrowing Myriad. We can expect a few long hours of discussions to follow. Good luck. With one more nod, Fixed left, taking Myriad with him and leaving Ben alone in the realm as he laid down, lost in his thoughts. As much as it annoyed him, he'd committed to staying, and now that he'd been slowed down, that just meant he was going to have to work all the harder. So ends my break. Looks like I've got some busy months ahead. When he opened his eyes the next morning, he found Thera already awake beside him, staring at what had been his sleeping face. Hey! She didn't say anything at first, watching longer until a small sigh broke free from her lips. The gods changed your mind. They did. Really got my hopes up that you might have given up on throwing yourself into danger. Sorry about that. I'm now back to working as hard as I can for the sake of this doomed planet. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad if you didn't keep calling it doomed. I don't know any other good descriptors for it. MH. So what now then? Now? I technically wait a bit to see if the gods are going to agree to the deal me and Fixed discussed. If they don't, then I'm back to giving up. Don't give a girl hope like that. When Analia spoke to me before, it was clear that enough gods managed to see in a day of you doing nothing how valuable you are as a resource. If you already got one to agree with you, then I'm sure it will go through. A guy can hope. Now though, dash. It looks like they agreed faster than I was expecting. What was that? A few hours. Myriad told him. A few hours? Yeah, I can manage, just gonna need to make something first. So, it looks like I'm off to help some people finish their jobs. Yeah, I got that. Any chance I could get a hand on the way there before you go off to work? I was supposed to show up in the afternoon a bit later today anyway. What are you doing now then? This is going to be a frequent trip for me from the sounds of it. Might as well make it a little shorter. What exactly is this? The guild master of the Magic Towers branch asked when he saw Ben and Thera come into his unusually crowded guild hall, holding what by all accounts appeared to be a doorframe. Mini gate. I don't suppose you have a closet or something I can shove this in? Not really, and what do you mean by mini gate? Okay. We'll stick it in your office then. That way it should be safe. He'd designed it slightly differently from the rest he'd made, requiring a key to activate it for anyone who wanted to go through, but had the benefit of massively shrinking how far he was going to need to travel the next time he wanted to get to that city, cutting out the need to pass through Analia first. He didn't bother explaining more. That guildmaster knew why he was there and knew that this time the gods were involved. It left the man afraid, given he'd stood in Ben's way before. Not that he blamed him. He was following the orders he'd been given by his boss. There was no helping it. Still, it made things smoother for him as they were led through, and Thera, who'd been carrying it with her magic, placed it down. All right, so now that that's done, just how are we doing things? Myriad explained. I hope that's not true of the party with the third tier I'm joining. Speaking of, I don't see any. So all of the experience I'll be gaining until then will be pulled off through Soul Source alone. Got it. In that case, let's start. All right. The gods have told me how we're doing things, so lead the way. The guildmaster did as he requested, bringing him to the first party, and after only a brief introduction he joined it, making the souls he needed to before he heard the expected notification in the others' minds, telling him he'd finished that party and let him move on to the next. It was a total of 4 more parties he went through before his own job was finished, and he noticed a few of the groups he already helped had rearranged themselves into other waiting groups, but he didn't care however they were being sorted. With Connect Master done, the only thing on his mind was the options he had and just what he was going to take next. Available jobs. Trap User. Craftsman Alchemy Path. Craftsman Artistic Path. Craftsman Blacksmith Path. Craftsman Cooking Path. Craftsman Stonecrafts Path. Craftsman Sewing Path. A Mathematician. A High Tank. Divine Enchanter. A High Marksman. A High Destruction Mage. Beginner Puppeteer. Holy Adversary. Title Master. A Multiversal Material Mage. Outsider. Body User. Slayer. A Judge. Assassin. Cycler. A Beginner Dancer.
Entrez.
Hive brain, a king of intelligence, a master of destiny, soul creator, beneficiary, a god-defiling gardener, expert, master actualizer, inclination master, abysmal connector. Two new jobs then. The fact that only one seemed to be a connect variant was a disappointment when he so badly wanted to raise that skill, but there was nothing he could do to change that, instead focusing on what he needed to. He'd fully intended to finish every connect job he could with that run for the bonuses it would give, and he'd take it without hesitation, even if his curiosity was piqued by the other new one. He'd never heard of a master job for inclination skills, but given it looked like he'd only gained it after getting 3 of them, that was the most likely reason. It wasn't hard to guess at what it would raise either, but given both his destruction and evil affinities were growing unreasonably quickly thanks to his world killer bonuses, and that his soul affinity was likely to start raising as well now that he'd gotten over the hump that was his awakening, he placed it in his mind as something potentially useful, just not immediately as he made his choice. Stolen from Royal Road. This story should be reported if encountered on Amazon. Give me Abysmal Connector. 1 down. He got no new skills from it, but with how many levels he'd gotten recently he hadn't been expecting it. Just claiming the bonuses was enough for him as he went on, moving through parties again to take the next ones. Give me Master of Destiny. Yeah, I'll take that. It seemed par for what he'd expected. A job that gave him bonuses to all skills. He had a Destined Holder title for which should have meant it would be giving him Connect bonuses as well. What he hadn't been expecting was the new skill, which would seem to imply that the job was not only giving him bonuses to unawakened skills he was the first to claim, but that he might have been the first person to get that new one as well. If you tie it into the effects of my skill learner title, then that may not be surprising, but if finishing this is going to give me permanent bonuses to gaining skills that nobody's gotten before, then that in itself is pretty cool. Even cooler to get a skill that sounds like might keep my soul from getting damaged or make it better at repairing itself after. I wonder if having soul affinity helped with that too? It's not like I've actually gained more evil or destructive skills despite those affinities supposedly making it easier, but at the same time I've only had those skills for around a month, and I don't know if I really want more evil or destructive skills either, unless they seem useful. Okay, doesn't matter right now, back to work. He had 2 more to take, and 1 more that would obviously help him with his goals, so without a second thought, as soon as he was done working through the parties around him, he touched his job crystal to make his choice. Hive brain. The job before had left him with no advanced variants to pull from, unlike what he'd normally expect from a master job, and with nothing else of interest he finished that last one so he could join his final party, taking the last job on his list that would obviously grant him any Connect bonuses. Divine Enchanter. Name: Ben Hef. Race: human. Titles: Apostle of Myriad, the Forgotten One, Miracle Maker, Skill Learner, Enemy of Aneth, Trial Defier, Trial Breaker, Godslayer, Monster, Madman, Godkiller, Threat, the Mad Apostle, Destined Holder of Connect, God of Destruction, Creator of Life, Awakener, Maniac, Brutal Blacksmith, Defier of Gods, Title Holder, Enemy of Valencia, Great Teacher, Student of Helori, Myriad's Monster, Outsider Slayer, Demigod Slayer, Transgressor, Destined Holder of Mental Symbiosis, Destined Holder of Alien Thought Structure, Destined Holder of Soul Production, Job Holder, Destined Holder of Actualization, Enemy of Duna. Jobs: Divine Enchanter, LV0. Previous jobs: Apprentice Craftsman, Craftsman, Priest, Enchanter, Mind User, Magic Item Maker, Magic Weapon Maker, High Enchanter, Fractured Mind User, Tree Tamer, High Craftsman, Apprentice Mage, True Mage, Tank, Heretic, Adventurer, Divine Heretic, Kin, Master Craftsman, Master Enchanter, Scholar, Connected Enchanter, Infernal Craftsman, Marksman, Destruction Mage, Material Mage, High Material Mage, Profane Enchanter, Master Material Mage, Impious Creator, Mind Master, Master Adventurer, Otherworldly Craftsman, Material Creator, Master of All, Ritual Enchanter, Holy Craftsman, Cursed Item Maker, Actualizer, Summoned Enchanter, Destructive Craftsman, Soul Mage, Freak Mind User, Unholy Thinker, Polymath, Alien Mind, Soul User, Soul Master, Evil Soul User, Soul Defiling Gardener, High Actualizer, World Killer, Connect Master, Abysmal Connector, Master of Destiny, Hive Brain. Attributes: a Vitality, 28-27. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 67 per hour. Mana, 52-82. Mana Recovery Rate, 437 per minute. Strength, 22-93. Agility, 621. Stamina, 49-85. Intelligence, 19710. Affinities: Light 3, Life 2, Fire 4, Water 3, Air 4, Earth 2, Death 3, Dark 1, Space 4, Time 5. Resistances: Light 68, Life 72, Fire 75, Water 69, Air 66, Earth 81, Death 78, Dark 85, Space 63, Time 61. Blessed Skills: Unending Crafting LV8*, Divine Enchanting LV8*, Unnatural Mind LV9*, Passive Skills: King of Sacrilege LV9*, Abind, Integrated Demonic Body LV9, Defense Enhancement LV9, Absorption Resistance LV9, Knowledge LV9*, All Affinity Resistance Enhancement LV9, Unnatural Inspiration LV6*, Bite Enhancement LV7, Piercing Resistance LV9, Artisan's Touch, Unnatural Intelligence Enhancement LV3*, Reconstructed Alien Thought Structure *, Blood Regeneration LV4, Extraction Enhancement LV9, Soul Affinity LV0*, Modifier Compatibility,
Material sense latonia no.
Flavor Enhancement LV2, Ill Intent LV3*, Balance Enhancement LV4, Soul Expansion LV5, Defiler of Ambrosia, Destruction Affinity LV4*, Evil Affinity LV4*, Soul Resilience LV0, Active Skills: Stealth LV2, Deep Connection LV8*, Cycling LV2, Marksmanship LV9, Material Manipulation LV8*, Swimming LV2, Dance LV1, Unnatural Thought Speed LV9*, Hive Mind LV5*, Rule Bender LV1, Aim LV8, Esoteric Actualization LV4*, Soul Source LV3*, Lucid Dreaming, Blessings: Myriad's Blessing, Analia's Blessing, Hilori's Blessing, Galwax's Blessing, Elvet's Mana Regeneration Blessing, Enetha's Blessing, Earth Pantheon's Blessing, Life Pantheon's Blessing, Dark Pantheon's Blessing, Olencia's Blessing, Nair's Blessing, Yuzu's Mana Regeneration Blessing, Witness of Chaos, On's Blessing, Fixtha's Blessing, Passive Pantheon's Blessing, Duna's Blessing, Jagel's Blessing, Trials, Trial of Analia and Talona, Trial of the Dead God, Earth Tower, Life Tower, Dark Tower. Not the most immediately useful level in the world, but whatever, I'll take it. Since Connect was at least partially classified as an enchanting skill, that meant it would be getting bonuses, but from there he was done. No more second-tier crafting or mine jobs, no more enchanting jobs in general, and no more Connect jobs. Almost everything else he had was either first-tier or a mystery to him, making whatever he'd have left to pick the next time significantly harder. But that's a future problem, I guess. Now that I've got this last job, all that's left is to raise it. He didn't bother hanging around once he was done, instead parting with Thera as she went to help at a hospital while he went through his newest mini-gate back to the shop, slipping on his jacket to begin the long process of taking in mana to create new souls. A process that, while unpleasant, was going to be significantly quicker than it had been, either during his time working through World Killer or his imprisonment. While he didn't know exactly how many, he knew that Elvet at least had a few levels to his job, and more important than that, compared to creating souls while trapped on the demon's world, Ben now held the skill in an awakened form. He wasn't going to be using it in every hour of the day like he had been then, but his higher level of power would more than make up for it. Which just leaves the question of how hard I should go with this. He told himself with a sigh. I could push myself to my limits, but he didn't want to, not really. When he'd first started doing it, he'd pushed himself to get back his freedom, and when he had been doing it to complete his last job, it had been at least partially out of desperation since he had no other way to reasonably level it. Now though? Now he was going to be spending weeks and months torturing his soul to help others grow when he'd originally planned on only needing to do it for a few days more. But there's nothing I can do about that now, he muttered. I'll just take things a little easier and hopefully my new skill will help. It didn't feel any less painful, but if soul resilience would help keep him from damaging himself in the process, then that was at least something to enjoy, with the only question of where to go from there as he began to absent-mindedly work. Abandoning the planet had been put on hold, likely indefinitely, but with his easy path to power slowed, that meant he needed some new ones. Options that could help him grow in strength and skill in the time he had left. But what? He asked himself. Aside from training and practice, there's only so much I can do. I can't take jobs any faster than I already do, so what does that leave me? Maybe if I take that inclination master job, it will give me a few new inclination skills? Connect inclination and sacrilege inclination would both be so helpful right now, but I'm pretty sure I'd be a lot more likely to gain something like mind inclination or crafting inclination. Still, it's worth hoping for, especially since if I do get a connect one, then it should be double dipping with my soul one. But what else? I can modify my soul after I do some more testing on the subject, which is, well, I already deal with a fair bit of constant soul pain now, so that's fine once I'm sure I can pick the best results, but if the amount of potential and power I can apply through modifying a soul holds true, then it would probably be best to wait to do it until after I manage the awakenings I want to get for maximum potential benefits, so that's a future goal. As for other things I could modify, the chimeras we observed were undeniably successful when it came to raw power. The thought felt practically invasive, but it was true. Regardless of how he felt about it, Vividus had done an undeniably successful job modifying the people of the world to grow their strength by leaps and bounds. Would he be willing to go through the same? Did you know this text is from a different site? Read the official version to support the creator. No. The answer was immediate. For all of the benefits there may have been to have, he didn't think he could handle being changed so thoroughly that he wouldn't be able to recognize his own face, and he couldn't actually trust Vividus to not do any extra experiments on him if he asked her to do some lighter modifications to his biology. Approaching her was a no-go from the start. Which means there really is only one other path I can take for some quick power. Man, Thera is not going to like me suggesting this. The towers. Really, he could take any god's trial, but the towers would be the best bang for his buck by far, even if there were limits in the ones he might challenge. While he could hypothetically take on any of the magic towers and just ditch them after the third floor, since that was the stage where he could challenge them without any restrictions on his skills while also claiming the blessing, that would mean added risk from challenging ones that neither himself nor Thera held the expected magic for, only made worse for the fact that it would also mean forgoing the skill levels he would gain for getting to the top. The idea that such a small loss mattered at all was ridiculous, and he knew it, but he couldn't deny that the thought annoyed him as well, so with some hesitation, he told himself that he'd ignore the 7 remaining affinity towers, at least for the time. He could always go back to take on those towers if it came to it, but for the moment he'd focus on the ones he could potentially claim the full benefits of: the non-affinity tower, craftsman's tower, and warrior's tower. The last of which he didn't actually know enough about to know if it would be a viable option, but the first 2 matched his needs perfectly. Beyond perfectly even, especially the second. He knew well from some of Nair's early attempts to woo him into it before the first wave that conquering it could give him one of the things he wanted most: his last level of deep connection. Nair had made it clear they'd level the skill back when he'd been looking to get it to the 2nd tier. If he could use it to get to the 9th level of that tier instead, then he could immediately begin tests to try and forcefully awaken it, something he already had some ideas he could test once he got to that point. It immediately placed that tower as a priority, but of the 2, it wouldn't be the one he'd do first. If he was going to hope that Awakening Connect would pull in his enchanting, then he wanted it at the highest level it could be, as well to be sure that the awakening process would give the maximum amount of strength to it that it could. meaning he needed to do the non-affinity tower first to get the 9th level of that skill as well beforehand so he could start trying to awaken connect the second that got its level instead of delaying longer. Which means I need info on that tower, and it just so happens that I have the perfect friends to bother for some help with that. Jake and Amy may have taken on that tower by now. It wouldn't hurt to visit them and peek into their heads before giving it a go, but first I need to finish up some of my soul modification experiments, so I'll go prep that once I've materialized a few more souls. Just thinking about how much he'd need to do and how quickly he'd want to complete the towers meant it was going to be a full couple of weeks, but that was what he'd been prepared for since coming back to the world, and it was what he'd expected the moment he'd given in to helping the planet, despite the way its gods would interfere in his life. He just needed to make the most of it. You know, while I'm out here I suppose I could visit those 3, Ben muttered as he walked through the hot city, trying his best to ignore the nearby volcano as he went through the streets of Nair's lands. I could get them one more level of connect while I'm here, maybe even easily so long as they've been practicing. Nair told him, gently trying to give a bit of mercy to his granddaughter and the summoned of his nation. Yeah, but seeing as how the world is ending, we want them getting all of the growth they can, don't we? Come on. Send them over to the research center so I don't need to find them. I'll help them both get a quick level and then be on my way. That's the spirit. And is everyone else I asked for already at your church? Cool. He picked up his pace as he heard that, making his way to the first church of Nair before letting himself in and finding 50 people waiting for him, all at his and their god's request. People who either wanted strength or felt enough loyalty to the world to be willing to participate in what many would call a mad experiment to let Ben carry on the testing he couldn't just do with the demons to see the further results of altering their base souls. Hello there. I'm the Apostle of Myriad. He greeted them brightly. Sorry to keep you waiting. I believe Nair already gave you all the details of what's happening, but if you could all take out your cards, so I could see them, I'll go over the details with you again before we start. Okay? He got some nods and some rummaging as the people who were waiting for him pulled their cards from their pockets while he went around, not only looking at them but also secretly ruffling through their minds and memories to see the various other times they checked their cards in the past and how much time had passed between each one in order to create a rough evaluation of each of their natural growth rates to compare against for his tests, leaving him to smile in the end. Perfect. Now, as for why you're all here, to put it simply, you're about to have your souls modified. The process has already gone through preliminary testing, and while I'm confident it's safe, there's always the potential for some risk. What I can say is you're going to be sore for a few days after this, and there's no escaping that fact. I feel pretty safe assuming most of you have never experienced soul pain before, but all you can do is wait it out. Now, what I can tell you is the purpose of this all. All of your attributes are going to grow after this, and rather significantly too. Your mana alone will grow by a few hundred points and your intelligence by almost 1,000, which may feel a little weird to you, but while gaining that growth so easily may seem more than worth it, what we don't know for sure are the long-term effects. Namely, if that's going to affect your personal growth rates at all. As you already are undoubtedly aware, being buffed can pretty severely stunt how your attributes grow while under them, so there's a chance that this could do the same thing on a permanent level. I think that result is unlikely, but it is a possibility all of you have to be aware of before we start. Now, having said all of that, if any of you want to leave, neither Nair nor I will hold it against you. The tail has been illicitly lifted. Should you spot it on Amazon, report the violation. Nobody left, not that he expected them to. Ignoring how hard it was for mortals to ignore the gods who they gave their faith, Nair had also been selective, searching out his believers for the ones who wanted easy power or the ones whose growth rates were low enough that they'd never have a chance of getting such high increases to their attributes before the third wave, which was admittedly the majority of people by then. More power meant better odds of survival. If the only thing they were risking was their potential for further growth when they'd be getting hundreds of points in some attributes in exchange without the need to work and train for them, then that was a trade many would make. So with all of them consenting, he got started, moving through them one by one as he looked at their souls before materializing on them, each person getting one of the 3 potential options that would give them 5% of his attributes in order to see if there'd be any difference in how any of those configurations acted, with the only thing left being to wait. He could feel the pain in them all, not overwhelming but undoubtedly there, and he tried to sound at least a bit sympathetic while telling them what to do. Alright, you're all done for now, but even though it hurts, you can't take any breaks. The point is to see how this affects your growth rate, so live how you always do, and Nair will be in touch with all of you in around a week to see how your attributes have changed. They gave their agreement, many through grimaces, before they began filtering out of the church and back to their lives, Ben appraising them as they went. Even with the change he'd just caused, with how high his intelligence was especially, he could tell that some were already thinking clearer as he subtly connected to them, an already worthwhile result for anyone in the world, even beyond the growth to any of their others. And so long as that works, I can then begin doing that on a much, much bigger scale. I'd need to make sure I get at least a couple more levels of soul expansion, and I'd need to get paid if the gods want me doing this on a big enough scale, which, let's be real, they will, and in that case, I should try to get them to raise my attributes even more, since that will get paid forward to the people I help too, but all of that is a future problem. For now, let's see if Nair's people and the researchers looking at all of the new magic materials in the world have found anything interesting for me. Nati, Xilli, Ei. Ben called out as he arrived, ignoring the blatant discomfort of the two while he smiled at them both broadly. It's been a while. It has been, Nati told him charitably, not making direct eye contact while Zilli kept her silence. My grandfather said you wanted us so we could have another lesson? Well, I was in the area and figured it would be good to get out of the way. But I see you both haven't been slacking. Both of you got to the 8th level of Connect since I'd last seen you, huh? Good work. Ah, we only managed it recently. Well, today I'm making sure you both get to the 9th, so make this easy for me, and try not to struggle. It will be over before you know it. Not giving either a chance to say more, he reached out and pulled both into his minds while taking over their bodies, making it so they'd walk with him as he carried out his main purpose of getting there instead of letting the two collapse to the ground. They still needed to be in his range after all, so he didn't want the connection breaking, and doing that was easier than dragging them along. With how fast I can think now, though, combined with the way my minds have grown since I'd last seen them, I'll probably get them their 9th level before I'm done here. Oh, what the heck? If they get it before I leave the city, I'll keep gonna try and bring them closer to awakening it. Having a couple of other awakened enchanters on the planet get access to all of the other awakened skills in the world would only be a good thing. Their fate sealed by the casual thought, he began practicing with them and dealt with the unfortunately strong reactions from them, seeing the change in his own skills since they'd last met. While in the real world, he let himself inside of the building the two women had been waiting in front of, going back to the research institute that had been set up to study the various magic materials he'd both created and discovered. Wrench, Nair's oracle, was already waiting for him as he walked in, eyeing Nati for only a moment until Nair presumably filled her in on what was happening, letting her focus her attention back on him. Welcome back, Apostle of Myriad. Have you been well? For the most part. It's nice to see you again too. Wrench, I hope you guys have something good for me. Perhaps less than you're hoping. We're doing our best, but please bear in mind how recent these materials still all are. Not like the natural ones that were discovered and studied by the gods and people on 100 worlds beforehand. Okay. I'll keep my expectations in check, so for now just lead me to your books. I'll take whatever progress I can get. Of course, this way. He was brought to an area he'd been once before, with a few new shelves with it compared to the last time, for him to pull out the records with his magic. Letting pages and pages of documents flutter past his eyes to read all there was, and finding that Wrench had been honest. There was little new of note. Some details that would let him lower the materialization cost for a few of the non-affinitied ones, and the affinities ones too if he was working through people with the right attributes for it, but by and large, what there mostly was ended up being further areas to try and test to glean whatever hidden effects a few of those substances still held. A bit disappointing, he muttered while the oracle with him nodded. We're doing our best, but the more obscure the effect, the harder it will be to find, combined with the inherent difficulty that sample size might be posing for us as well. In most cases, they essentially only had a grain of each material to work with, valuable beyond measure by their nature but harder to study for the fact, especially since it was possible that some of their effects just might not have been able to present themselves at such a small scale, at least not in a way that would be noticeable for the people researching it all. It made him wonder if he should try to create bigger volumes to work with as well, but there were safety concerns tied into that idea. More of any of those new substances may have meant a bigger magical effect to observe, but that could also have meant a more dangerous one for any researcher to be exposed to. As things stood, the volume that existed might have kept things slow, but it would also contribute a bit of safety as well. Unauthorized duplication. This tale has been taken without consent. Report sightings. MMH, it's not like there's a rush to learn beyond my own curiosity, but my curiosity matters a lot to me. Maybe I'll make slightly bigger volumes to test for some of them. Something to work with at least. Not the result he'd hoped for when he went out there, with that done and notifications ringing out in his two students' heads telling him they gained their levels. He once more left that city, going for his next task of the day at the Magic Towers. The second he'd walked into the guild, there were eyes on him, no doubt because of what he'd done there so recently. Staff and adventurers alike had seen him speed through the jobs of a shocking number of people, making him largely recognizable and leaving one of the employees to abandon their post to run to the back, bringing their guild master with them, with the man making his way over. And what might I do for you today, Apostle Ben? He asked, still looking nervous after finding out just who he'd been told to lie to in the past, while Ben ignored the other's emotional state. Nothing you need to worry about. I was just going to put in a request. Then allow me to help. It will leave the staff more comfortable too. I'm sure the guild master has plenty of better things to be doing. Ahem. It's been made clear to me that you're a priority. To avoid any unfortunate situations again, and to save my staff some stress, please just come to my office any time you want to put in a quest. Well, if you're sure. He had a gate in the man's office anyway, so that would be more convenient overall. If that was how they wanted to do things, then he wasn't going to argue, instead getting to the point. I want you to put out a request to gather anyone who can be found who's taken on the non-affinity tower. If he was going to be taking it on, then he wanted all of the information he could get from it, same as he'd done for the Dark Tower, but the Guildmaster's reaction made it clear things wouldn't be so simple. I'm afraid that will probably be a bit harder than you think. Why? He asked, his eyes narrowing at the man while he imagined some god had once more decided to get in his way again, against the idea that he secure whatever information he could to make his way to the top of a new tower, and sensing Ben's displeasure, the guild master quickly shook his head. The rarity of them, he explained, trying to make sure he was polite and thorough in it. Nobody challenges that tower. To my knowledge, the last time anyone did was over a decade ago. What? Explain that. Why would challengers for it be so rare? He knew taking on a tower wasn't some common thing, but he'd gotten a room full of challengers when he'd made the same request for those who'd taken on the Dark Tower. Why should the non-affinitied one be so different? To Ben's annoyance, it seemed there was a good reason. Many of them, in fact. The non-affinity tower in essence represents a class of magic instead of a subsection of it, the way each affinity tower represents a section of affinity magic as a broader category. It makes people significantly less comfortable to take it on. For one of the other towers, you might get unawakened challengers from time to time if they're at least at a high enough level, but that's because something like an earth mage can expect to deal with problems that can be solved by earth magic in their tower. But would it hold true if they thought there was a risk they might encounter something that could only be dealt with through fire magic? That's in essence the main concern of anyone holding a non-affinity magic on the planet, even for the few who've awakened their magics. Combined with the fact that until recently there was only a single true non-affinity mage on the planet in the form of Vasta, who's never taken it on, and the general rarity of that class of magic altogether, and what you have is a rather undesirable recipe. Ben frowned at the explanation, more out of annoyance than anything else. He'd confirm it with the gods later, but what he was hearing made sense, perhaps even more so than the guildmaster was implying. Ben in particular knew how broad non-affinity magics could be. He would have personally placed the potential of that power beyond even the scope of all of the affinity magics combined, but that made challenging it with anything beyond a true second-tier skill, the likes of what Thera or Vasta, held a far larger risk than any of the tower. What if he were to take it on alone without either of them? He'd be forced to hope that whatever challenges it contained would be solvable through his material manipulation, divine enchanting, and soul source alone, leaving him doomed if it held anything that needed a skill akin to clairvoyance. Hell, even if I had a team of 5 with each of us holding a different awakened non-affinity magic, I'd still feel worried about it if we didn't have someone with a general non-affinity magic to round things out. Okay, this is a problem, but not an insurmountable one. The guy says that he thinks it's been over a decade, but I know Jake and Vasta were planning on going sometime before the next wave. There's a chance they've taken it on since I've seen them last and word just hasn't spread yet, right? Okay, next stop decided I'll just be prepared for some bad news. It was slim, but if they had gone to take it on then, he'd at least be able to learn what the first floor held with certainty, and with that bit of hope, he went off to find them, praying for just a bit of good news. Well, that was a freaking letdown. While he still couldn't say whether or not they'd done it, what he had found out was that none of them were home. Jake, Amy, and Yuzu had left the day before, sounding like they'd be gone for a few more, and by all accounts their teachers had left with them, meaning he couldn't probe their minds for whatever he might find. That left him making his way back to the shop, using the time he had left in the day to slip on his coat and begin the work that was materializing souls, while at the same time making more of his mana bracelets and materializers as the time went on. For the first, he was at least already seeing progress, with his growing job level showing him that all of the other ways he'd grown, with his levels of soul source, soul expansion, and soul affinity, were all more than enough to make up for the fact that he was taking things slightly easier to spare himself just a bit of pain and suffering. Man, no matter how much it hurts, that feels so good. He felt more mana flood him with the new level of soul expansion and tied with the growth of his soul affinity. He was immediately able to create more than he'd been making only seconds before, not changing the strain he was under but improving the output to an extent that he couldn't help but feel a bit better about giving in to help the gods. Each time he leveled his soul affinity, soul expansion, and soul source, he would instantly be able to make more and raise the speed he acquired job experience, shrinking the time it would take to help all of the third tiers while his thoughts ran wild. Obviously, soul source was proving its worth, not only with his experiments to modify people's souls but also through the bands he was making as well as the materializers, and soul affinity had the fantastic benefit of lowering the mana cost of soul skills while at the same time making it easier for him to level and gain more. But as great as both of those were, it was his soul expansion that captured his imagination while he worked. Perhaps it was one of the more straightforward of any of his soul skills, but its effect was huge, letting him get an instant and significant boost of growth to his mana each time he raised it, with one more fact making it feel all the more valuable. It was still only at the first tier. He'd done that math, and he knew by that point that each level of the skill was raising both his total mana capacity along with his regeneration rate by about 10% of the volume he held at each level, which by itself was huge. But what if he could push it further? Just what might he manage if he could get it to the second tier like so many of his other skills? This tale has been unlawfully lifted from Royal Road. If you spot it on Amazon, please report it. Hell, even if it just keeps giving me that 10% each time, it would be great if I got it there, but if it would give me even more? I can only imagine my pool growing by 50% each level, and with how significant an awakening is, something like that doesn't feel out of the question, leaving the only issue being how I'd ever awaken it. Kind of feel like even trying something like that might leave me accidentally destroying my soul with however much I'd need to overfill it. Yeah. Okay, since I'm only at the 6th level of it, that will be a little while off, but I think before I even begin to consider trying it, I'll need to get my soul resilience to the 9th level too. Hell, maybe even awaken that one first if I can. This is definitely a better safe than sorry situation. Because you're overly judgmental of your wonderful apostle's goals and aspirations. So what's up? Okay, can do. He slipped off the jacket and put a pause to his work, waiting to hear from his god about whatever that was about as the moments passed before the cube spoke up, pure pleasure in his tone. Wait, seriously? He asked, not bothering to keep the conversation to the confines of his head since he was alone. No longer worried about the ethical implications of getting your faith in ways like this? Hey, if it works for you, it works for me. In that case, this should be a decent way to mix up the day a bit. Give me a second. He slipped the coat back on while figuring out the basic structure of what he wanted to materialize, bringing forth a thick square tile that was about the size of the palm of his hand, filled to the brim with souls. Compared to his jacket, doing that was significantly easier too, not needing him to arrange the crystal in a way that would be comfortable and instead focusing on squeezing as many into the space as was possible, ending with 10,000 in that one spot after expending everything he'd pulled into himself. Okay. Now I've just got to make enough of these to tile all of your churches here in Analia, and in all faith, unless you've gotten more since this last came up? Too late, this has me interested. Let's see, I could also replace some of the shelves and seats I have in the Stonewall branch, at least to fit in even more without obstructing visitors. Since I have the sub-basement set up as my emergency get-out-of-hell-free card, I won't be doing that one, but I'll be able to work on the rest of the space. Even if it will take me a fair bit of time to make all of these. But then, I'll be squeezing a positively insane volume of mana into your church by doing this, won't I? And it would be an absolute shame not to use it. And there we go, perfect. Ben beamed as he finished tiling the main floor of the church, with it just being that floor. After having his idea, he'd pushed his soul a bit to materialize all he'd need, but it still left the walls and ceiling of that level bare of any new decoration. Something he planned to slowly chip away at in the coming weeks and months as he spoke up to his god. Feeling anything? I maybe pushed myself a bit too hard, Ben admitted with a shrug. But I just made a significant dent in Elvet's job doing this and made you a few million souls to get you more faith in the process. I'd say that it's worth the trade. And now that I've done my bit for you and the world, it's time for me to get my due. Moving to the front of the room where a statue of Myriad gently floated above a podium, Ben took the podium itself and reshaped it, hollowing the base out to fit in one of his materializers as lines of Morabugel that had been placed beneath all of the new tiles directed the overwhelming volume of mana to it, all to make the hardest substance there was to create in the universe that he was aware of. Stopstone, the single magic material he was aware of that didn't react with magic in any way and took hundreds of thousands of points to just force a few dust particles into existence that would now be being created automatically, with the materializer slowly dropping entire grains of the stuff into a waiting bucket for him to check on and collect in the future after it had piled up for a while. Myriad. It's something that isn't affected by magic. I can think of a million things to do with it. Hell, it's going to be fun just to try forging it once I get enough. I just need to be a little patient. Hey, I can be plenty patient. Look at me not immediately running back to make more soul tiles for your church. I've got the patience of a saint. A small grimace touched his lips as he thought about it before giving his answer. Dinner and what might be a slightly awkward conversation. It's fine, the sooner I bring it up the better. So, I want to challenge the non-affinity tower. Both Thera and Sonia froze while he said it, putting a pause to their meal before Thera just shook her head and sighed. Support the author by searching for the original publication of this novel. You know, you really gave me way too much hope before when you told me you were done with everything. Yeah, sorry about that. It's fine. I really was expecting something like this, even if not this soon. She sighed again. So when are we going? Not really sure yet, maybe a week or two. I'm waiting to find Vasta to hope she and Jake took it on so I can at least get a bit of a clue about it, because it sounds like I have no chance of finding people who went through it the way I did for the Dark Tower, and then based on whatever I'm able to find out we can figure out if there's another 3 on the planet who might make good additions to our team. Not going to try and get those 2 for ourselves if they haven't taken it on yet? God. I'd love to, but I've got to assume they have their own plans for this. Vasta, Jake, and Amy are all doing it for sure, and I've got to assume that if they aren't taking Yuzu and Uriel to carry them to the end, that they'll be taking the other 2 non-affinity mages. Although if they were going to do that, it isn't unreasonable to assume they might ask you to go instead of one of those guys. Even if they do, I'm going with you. If we're going to look for 2 more, we could take Glob and his teacher. I'm not against it, but taking 2 barrier mages is a bit unbalanced for going against something like a tower. But if we can't find any better options, we talk to them. After I find Vasta, I'll talk to Myriad and the others to see if they know anyone else who might be a good fit. Alright, and what's the goal then? Trying to get another level of your soul source to get through jobs faster. Ha, tempting, but not this time. It gets an insane level of practice right now anyway. The aim is my enchanting. I'm a level away from being a contender for it. It's the perfect time to try to cut down on the time. And is that all? She asked through narrowed eyes. She knew his goal was to reach the 3rd tier for 2 separate skills, but enchanting wasn't one of them, with him admitting his further aim from there. And maybe another week after I plan on taking Craftsman's Tower, but seeing as how that one doesn't kill its challengers, it's less of a big deal. Since Nair was telling me they'd be able to awaken my connect when it was still stuck at the 1st tier, that means I'll be able to get my last one from them if I take it on. How many skills will that leave you as a contender for by this point? Sonia asked while Thera fell silent, far too aware of just how that challenge aligned with his goals. I'm currently at 4, so that would bring me to 6, but 3 of them are all mind skills, so it doesn't really count. Why wouldn't that count? Sonia muttered, her question ignored while Thera gave in. Alright, that at least lets me warn people I'll be disappearing for a bit. And then what are you going to do after that? After what? She looked at him for a moment and only after accepting he wasn't playing coy, shook her head. Becoming a contender for your deep connection is part of one of your goals, right? What are you doing after that? Well, I guess just whatever I can. Once he got that level, the goal was going to be to awaken Connect to its 3rd tier, and while he had a few ideas for how he might pull it off, all of them lacking any of the safety he would have preferred, but that was a future concern. First he needed his levels, then he'd worry about how to go beyond them. Thank you for joining us today, Ben, spoke Speeny, the herring-like head of the Mages Guild once he arrived and told the front desk what he was there for, being led to the guild master himself. As promised, back when he'd completed all of the available books at the Magic Tower's library, he'd come to give a talk. An event that wasn't the best use of his time that he'd nonetheless agreed to, if only for a change of pace as much as anything else. It was just one day, but it was also a unique opportunity, and even if he wasn't going to get anything significant for it, it was also a good way to spread Myriad's name and fame just a bit more. Of course, along with that, it never hurt to have one of the people in charge of one of the world's major guilds viewing him positively. Especially when I just got the head of the Adventurers Guild fired and the old head of the Craftsmen's Guild is in the middle of being tortured. That means I don't currently know who's running either of those 2 guilds. Oh well, not important. He pushed those thoughts to the side to instead focus on Speeny, giving the man a smile. It's my pleasure to be here. Can I ask how many I'll be talking to today? About 100. I reached out to some the guild considers are more promising and passionate mages, and while some were unreachable while many others too busy hunting down the demons, either by themselves or with different armies, I'd say we got a decent turnout. Interesting. Then just out of curiosity, how promising does the guild rank me? The other man laughed at that. Well, while you haven't involved yourself with us too deeply, I can at least tell you that from what we know we've been forced to give you a rather high evaluation. The holder of what? 2 awakened magics and likely at a high level as well? Not to mention how things turned out at the library and Killy's evaluation of you, which holds plenty of weight in these walls. You can consider yourself near the top when it comes to our registered 2nd-tier mages. Love hearing that. In that case, shall we go? Of course, they should all be seated by now. I hope you've prepared something interesting for them. I've done my best. He was led to a small auditorium from there, up to a stage that stared out to the small crowd before him while Speeny stood at the front. Hello everyone. Thank you for making some time for the guest speaker we've brought in. More than a few of you likely recognize him yourselves if you'd been lucky enough to have gotten some of his time at the library. I hope you all give a warm welcome to the Apostle of Myriad, Ben. The introduction was met with polite applause while he looked out into the crowd with their focus firmly on him. He could recognize a few, both from the help he'd given at the library as well from his mass awakening event, and it was clear that even the ones who hadn't seen him before were aware of him to one extent or another and were all interested to hear whatever he had to talk about. Hello everyone. Thank you for having me today. I wanted to start things off with a show of hands. How many of you are enchanters? Not a single hand went up and left Ben to chuckle, having expected as much as he went on. In that case, bestowers then? Still no one raised their hands, not that he was shocked. Too bad. I'm not a bestower myself, but I've only met one, and I'm always hoping to come across more. In that case, let's go even broader. How many of you have a non-affinitied magic? This time 3 hands went up and he pointed to the first. Perfect. You there. Would you be willing to share what magics you hold? Affinitied and otherwise. Sure. I use mainly space and clairvoyance. Wonderful. Both awakened? Just the space. Okay, and I'd assume the clairvoyance is used to aid your space magic? Helping you get the lay of the land before teleporting perhaps. That's correct. Very good. All right, and next you, he said as he pointed to the second person with them answering in turn. An awakened heir. along with a fire and strengthening. An interesting combination. Should I take it you use your air magic to empower and exert more control over your flames? That's right. And then why strengthening as well? I work as a rank 2 adventurer. Strengthening allows me to empower my party when we fight if need be, as well as myself if anything gets closer than I was expecting to handle. And in an emergency, it can help me ensure that everyone I'm with can escape. I see. Is that why you learned it? It is. If you come across this story on Amazon, be aware that it has been stolen from Royal Road. Please report it. Good. And finally you, he said, pointing out the final person to raise their hand. Your magics. An awakened death along with corpse song. That's supposed to be one of the rarer non-affinity branches in the world, and yet you're now the third holder of it I've met. Any chance you acquired it with the help of Zandale or one of his apprentices? It was an apprentice of the skill master. I was lucky enough to make his acquaintance, and he helped me gain the magic in the time the two of us were working together. I see, and I'm assuming you chose it because it pairs well with death magic? Kill something and then see its history for any other useful information. That's correct. I thought it would be a potent combination once the waves arrived, and so far it has been. I've been able to aid my team in tracking down a few different demon groups. A noble goal, but if there's one thing for everyone here to take away, it's both how few of you hold a non-affinity magic and that none of you hold an awakened one. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. There's only so many hours in the day to practice and learn and train, so why take the time? Many of you were probably born with at least one magic as your blessed skill, and the rest that didn't, still likely trained in magics you had a high affinity for. It only makes sense. Your affinity lowers the mana cost, along with the difficulty in gaining and leveling skills the higher it is. Anyone who wants to be a mage should at least focus on the area they're most compatible with in the beginning to help grow their mana pool to pursue other areas of interest, but from here, I'm going to take some time to try and convince you all of the value of non-affinity magics and why even now, with the third wave on the way, it could be worth your while to try and gain one. The first reason, and what is admittedly the weakest one I'll present to you, is that it can help with your overall magic control. In all of my reading, it's not something I've actually seen recorded in any books, which reminds me, I really do need to write this down, but back on track. This is something confirmed by the goddess Analia that I've personally seen verified through a friend who originally had terrible control of their magic. The more branches you have access to and the higher their level, the better your overall control of magic will be. Now, that probably doesn't matter to most of you. It's pretty easy to think that you just need to level your current magics and that will help with your overall control immediately. And while that might be true, the question then becomes if you can. Each of you here is a high-level mage, to the point that when you consider the jobs you might have gone through already and the mana pools you all must hold, it might actually be easier to gain a new branch of magic instead of leveling your skills. Of course, gaining the Zeroth level of a Tier 1 skill is not going to grant you a fraction of the control you'd gain from leveling an awakened magic, but if you don't think you'll be able to achieve a new level in what you already have before the next wave, then trying to gain a new one might help you save 1 or 2 points of mana on everything you cast, and as small as that may sound, it could be the difference between life and death for you and the people around you. Second then is just what non-affinity magics can do, he told them as he looked across the stage, seeing they were all still watching to see just where he was going with things. Unlike the affinity branches with their clear, distinct roles, non-affinity magic is harder to pin down. There's been a few different works on the topic and different theories on it, but seeing as how this is my presentation, you're all going to hear the one I subscribe to. Everything. The base component of any affinity mana is plain mana, and without the affinity, it can still be wielded in the same way, only at a greater mana cost, and once you think about things that way, so much more becomes possible. For example, this. He materialized a blackboard and some chalk as he said it, getting to see a few in the room sit up a bit straighter for the display of power, and he smiled at them all while he went on. I'll make things clear to you here. I have no affinity magics. I am incapable of ever getting any affinity magics. The highest one my card shows to be reflected in my soul is time with the oh-so-grand value of 5. The materialization you just witnessed is because after raising up my skill material user, I was able to look past some preconceived assumptions about what magic can and can't do to force my will on the world, and as a result it awakened the skill, pulling in another non-affinitied magic simply called Destruction to let it awaken to my final Tier 2 option of material manipulation. And the most interesting thing is that when I first started researching those two original magics, I'd only found one book on each of them within this city's great library. While some might see becoming a non-affinitied mage to be the end goal of anyone who learns a non-affinitied magic, there's plenty of value to find in pushing it as far as it will go in a slightly less broad form. Why, even the corpse song one of you holds could be positively brimming with potential. While this doesn't mean no one has ever achieved it, in all of my reading I've never seen any records of what is possible for it once it becomes a second-tier skill, let alone a third-tier one if you're feeling ambitious. If you take the time to read through the library's books on the topic, you'll potentially find branches of it you never imagined which might let you achieve things you're currently incapable of with the affinities you hold, increasing both your overall options and power as a result. He could see that if he'd had their attention before, he had their investment now with more than a few eyes gleaming and the minds he could reach from where he stood already considering making a stop at the library once he was done to explore just what options they might not have given proper consideration before, just to see what resonated with them. But Ben wasn't done there. All of that was just the lead-up to the main topic he had been looking to discuss, and he began putting the blackboard he'd created to use, drawing diagrams on it while he spoke up. That brings us to my final talking point on the value of learning a non-affinitied magic, mana modifiers. If you haven't heard of them, that's okay, they're a fairly new area of research. One I've been conducting with both the gods and a small research institution I'd set up that were found while studying a different topic. You're all surely aware of the summoned, of course. The 200 brought to this world from other realities whose souls ended up empowered by the experience and resulted in some extra powerful hands that were brought to the planet, but what is less widely known about is the spell that was used to bring them here. A spell that the gods of this world didn't create, with a couple of them each instead independently buying it from passing void gods back before their worlds fell, with the original creators of it lost to time. All we do know is that it's advanced in a way that the magic of this world simply isn't a precision piece of magic engineering in comparison to how what currently exists is treated somewhere more between a science and an art form, but that is a gap that can slowly be bridged with time and study. While magic modifiers of all affinities have been found and usually require precise mixtures of affinities, what I'm currently going to teach you about is only a small combination of them that, when used together in the correct arrangement, can strengthen most affinitied spells if a bit of non-affinitied mana is applied correctly during the casting process to whatever else you're working with, enhancing the effect of your spell without significantly raising the mana cost that you'd all be able to pull off so long as you can acquire even the Zeroth level of a non-affinitied magic of your choice. He didn't need to read any minds to understand their investment at that point. It was clear as day, and with their full attention he went on, detailing the discoveries he and his team had made while giving examples he'd seen tested as the rest of his talk went on. Alright, and with that I'll end here. If you're interested in learning more about what we currently know about mana modifiers, you can find a couple books on the topic I've written in the library, and if you're at all satisfied with my little presentation, then do me a favor and shoot Myriad a prayer. Otherwise, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you all. He got a round of applause for his talk, and while a few went off immediately, more instead went to him to pick his brain, wanting the chance to speak some more on the topic of non-affinity magics and the magic modifiers he and his team had discovered so far, spending another hour on it before eventually they left too, many of them off to do some reading in the library to decide if any of the non-affinity magics might be right for them, leaving only himself and the guild master Speeny in the end. I must say, an overall excellent presentation, Ben, the herring person told him brightly. At least among this crowd, I'd say you've done an excellent job whipping up some enthusiasm for the topic. Ha, I'm glad it worked out. If the room was full of non-affinitied users, then I would have had to basically cut out my first 2 points altogether. Mind if I ask? I know you guys ask what magic a guild member holds while registering, and I'm sure a few likely update their details if they learn more, but have you broken that down into a census of what percentage of members hold what magics? I honestly would be pretty curious to see the exact numbers for how many people bother learning a non-affinitied branch. From his experience of constantly connecting to anyone and everyone he would pass in the street, he placed the likelihood of any random person holding a magic of that variety as about 1 in 1,000, though that immediately got significantly worse if he took out the most common non-affinitied branch of enchanting. Drop that, and the odds went to 1 in 3,000 instead, though that was still pulling from the general populace. Pulling from an organization composed of people who outright identified themselves as mages was sure to yield better odds, even if it seemed he wouldn't be able to get a precise answer. If I had to guess, I'd say it's less than 1% of our members, perhaps around 1 in 200. But that's an estimate based on my own observation, not hard data. I haven't checked the actual numbers for it, but your presentation has piqued my curiosity as well. I must admit, I think I'll give the numbers within our guild a closer look a bit later. Well, should I get the chance to swing by again, I'd love to know. In that case, how would you feel about presenting again? Spini asked him, being clear he was hoping for such a thing. You did an excellent job inspiring the curiosity of those who were already here, and given that's part of the point of the guild as a whole, I'd love to get you in front of a larger crowd. I appreciate the offer, but doing it again anytime soon might be a challenge. The war has me as busy as anyone else. Of course, if we win in the end, I'd be happy to take some time to spread some of the virtues of non-affinitied magics. Then I shall have yet one more reason to hope for a good result for the war. Still, I understand. In that case, it was wonderful to have you, Ben. Stop by again should you find the time. Will do, thank you, Spini. The author's content has been appropriated. Report any instances of this story on Amazon. His task done, Ben made his way back to the shop, feeling rather good about himself while he did. Presenting had been a nice change of pace, and given that it was the only type of magic he could access, he would be nothing but thrilled if more mages started training in it, hopefully expanding the field as a whole with whatever discoveries there still might have been to make, along with spells to develop too. Who knows, maybe one or two of them will even go down the routes I have. He thought happily. Both material user and destruction could do to have a few more users. Given the rarity of those two based on the information he'd found in the library, there was a very real chance he was the only person to currently hold them, even if they'd merged during his awakening and grown beyond their original limits. Still, getting more users in the world meant there was the potential for others to discover uses that he wouldn't be able to see. An exciting prospect that only slipped away as he considered how far in the future any such discoveries might be. They were all awakened mages. It's more than possible that with their skills and job bonuses that they'll be able to acquire new magics and maybe even get as far as the second level before the next wave, but beyond that, I'd need to still be alive for any real discoveries they might make. Considering his own mortality was a depressing affair he couldn't escape, the thoughts constantly slipping back into his head as he looked at himself and what he wanted to become and still questioned if it would be enough, with the answer constantly feeling like a strong no. He needed power, but just how much of it he would get was doomed to be limited from the start, with no way to escape that fact. So I've just got to cross my fingers and pray that a third-tier sacrilege will make for as handy of an anti-god tool as I'm hoping it will be, continuing to only leave me with the question of how to possibly get it. As things stand, it actually looks like I might pull off getting my third-tier connect first if any of my ideas to raise it work and don't kill me in the process. Man, I really am going to need to kill another god, aren't I? He felt some inevitably to that fact, but as the proud holder of 3 enemy titles, it wasn't like he didn't have options. Of course, when it came to his newest one, no matter how mad it had made him, he had to admit that giving Duna a death sentence for getting in his way was a bit much. Now Eneth, whose apostle had tried to kill him and whose son the god had known was going to try and kill him, made for the best contender for a bit of guilt-free deicide, with Olencia coming in at a close second for both having threatened his life along with his oracle personally trying to kill both him and sack hell. Okay, got the order down. If I get down to 5 or 6 months left before the next wave and I've managed to awaken Connect without awakening my sacrilege, I'll murder Eneth, Olencia, and if neither of those two gets the job done, then Duna too. Still, I'm sure getting Eneth alone will do the job, so that should be fine. I'll figure out the rest later. With no gods in his head to hear and judge his casual murder plans, there were no reactions to it either, other than Ben's own bit of comfort that, worst to worst, he did in fact have a few potential paths he could take to raise his skill should he not find any other way the divine of the world might have an easier time stomaching. It did make his own prospects feel a bit brighter though, leaving the goal from there as awakening Connect as soon as possible. If things go well, it will be a month, he told himself. And if they don't, well, then we'll see just how hard I need to push myself. His train of thought was broken by a knock on the door, and willing to take whatever distraction he could get, Ben went to answer it, finding Sakhel standing outside it, looking uncomfortable. Oh, hey Sakhel, what's up? Did you just get back to town? Hey Bing. Yeah, an hour ago and things went well on our quest and I came to tell you how things went with the bracelets you gave us as well, but, okay, so don't be mad. Why? Not saying a word, Sakhel instead reached beside her, pulling another girl in sight with Dallaire there, awkwardly smiling at him.